Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking down the candlelit corridors of 18th century Versailles, not to eavesdrop on kings or adjust a powdered wig, but for something far more daring. We're on the trail of jam-smudged napkins, honey-drizzled secrets, and the people who risked everything for one more mouthful of forbidden cake. Picture this: the air inside the palace is warm with perfume and candle smoke, but your stomach grumbles in protest. Dinner was 6 hours ago. You said no to that third bite of roast duck because someone was watching. And now, here in the velvet-lined quiet of your bedchamber, the craving hits. A sweet roll. A little apple tart. Maybe something with cheese. Too bad the kitchens have closed, the plates are locked in sideboards, and the rules of court demand you simply suffer. Politely. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're joining from somewhere snack-worthy, post your location and local time below. I'd love to know who else is nibbling their way through history with me tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch beneath brocade sheets that feel oddly like upholstery. Outside your bedroom window, fountains gurgle with ceaseless confidence. Somewhere in the distance, a violin sighs under practiced fingers. But your stomach, alas, is not feeling quite so regal. It growls. Audibly. Treasonously. At Versailles, the kitchens were impressive: labyrinthine ovens, silver-grated bread ovens, and a staff that numbered in the hundreds. But they were also bound by rigid rules. Meals were prepared at set times, for designated people, in carefully assigned zones. Once the final plate had been whisked away, that was it. The doors were closed. The larders locked. Even the Dauphin, heir to the throne, could not simply request a snack without triggering at least 3 layers of bureaucratic ceremony. A note had to be written, passed to a valet, approved by a maitre d'hotel, relayed to the scullery via footman, and finally cleared by a supervisor whose sole purpose in life was to prevent nighttime snacking. Why? Because Versailles was about control. It wasn't a home, it was a spectacle. An engine of etiquette, designed to keep the nobility docile and slightly dizzy with hunger. Historians still argue whether this level of food restriction was meant to enforce discipline or simply create a sense of ritualized deprivation. Either way, it meant one thing: if you wanted a tart after sunset, you'd better have friends in low places. Which is exactly how the secret snack rings began. It started small. A leftover roll, squirreled away in a servant's sleeve. A candied fig slipped between the folds of a fan. But as more and more courtiers began to experience the same late-night pangs, the practice became an art. The rules of court were strict, but hunger, especially the fancy kind, has a way of breeding innovation. You, dear listener, are about to become one of them. It begins with a tap at your door. 3 raps, soft and deliberate. You open it a crack. No one's there. But down the hallway, you spot it, a small silver tray, tucked behind the base of a marble bust, containing something magical. A sliver of almond cake. A smear of apricot jam. One perfect candied orange peel, curled like a punctuation mark. Next to the plate is a note. Folded twice, sealed with nothing but a sticky thumbprint and the faint scent of vanilla. You unfold it. It reads, "Keep the fork. Same time tomorrow. West stairwell." You look down. There is, in fact, a small silver fork on the tray. You pocket it. And just like that, you're in. The next night, you wait by the west stairwell. It's the least fashionable of the staircases. The one with slightly chipped molding and the scent of someone else's anxiety. You linger casually, pretending to admire the wallpaper. A servant passes by. Doesn't stop. But as he does, he lets fall a small linen pouch. You retrieve it seconds later. Inside? 2 sugar cubes and a wedge of soft goat cheese, wrapped in perfumed paper. It tastes like treason, and it's divine. The palace, you realize, is alive with these miniature rebellions. Not all of them are elegant. Some involve hollowed-out books stuffed with brioche. Others rely on decoy napkins embroidered with decoy monograms. There's talk of a pageboy who invented a whole second set of shoe buckles just to store cherries inside. No one knows where he ended up. Some say he was promoted. Others say he exploded. But the point is, Versailles is leaking snacks. And each delivery carries with it not just flavor, but meaning. That almond tart wasn't just food, it was trust. It meant someone risked their place to satisfy your craving. It meant someone knew what you wanted before you asked. You start leaving notes of your own. Short ones. Fewer raisins. More custard. A strawberry if the weather allows. Could we attempt cheese with pepper next time? The responses come back in edible form. Each tray is a message, a reply, a carefully plated conspiracy. Your hunger becomes a language. One spoonful at a time. There's a kind of comfort in it. A rhythm. The palace by day is blinding. Too many mirrors, too many expectations. But at night, in the hushed quiet of the hidden hallways, with sugar on your tongue and silence in your steps, you begin to understand the true luxury of Versailles. It isn't gold. It isn't lace. It's the stolen moment. The forbidden slice. The joy of knowing you're part of something sweet and secret. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, there will be more. You wake before the sun, not because you're disciplined, but because someone dropped a spoon outside your door. A tiny clink against the marble, then nothing. But it's enough. In this palace, even silence is loud when it isn't supposed to be. You slip from your bed, toes brushing the silk rug. Everything in your room is delicately excessive. The mirror frame that's more gold than glass, the armchair no one's ever sat in, the bowl of fake fruit that smells faintly of ambition. But none of it matters right now. Because your mind is already on the spoon. You find it lying neatly at the base of the wall, polished, harmless, and ordinary in every way, except for the ribbon tied to its handle. Yellow silk. One knot. No bow. Just enough to mean something to someone. It's a signal. Not for breakfast. That won't arrive for hours and will consist of things no one genuinely wants to eat at dawn. Dry toast, burnt coffee, an egg boiled into oblivion. No, the spoon means there's something happening today. Something worth being hungry for. You slip it into your pocket, wrap a shawl around your shoulders, and step out into the hallway, shoes silent on stone. Versailles at this hour is half asleep, which is to say only mildly judgmental. The portraits aren't watching. The maids are still blinking. The chandeliers are mercifully unlit. You make your way toward the lower corridor, where kitchen-adjacent gossip tends to float. And there, just as predicted, you find him, Claude, assistant to the assistant of the third royal confectioner. He's standing near the linen cabinet pretending to count napkins, which is code for I know something. Claude never speaks above a whisper. He claims it's out of reverence for butter. You didn't hear this from me, he says, which is how he starts every sentence, even when he's alone. But someone smuggled an entire pheasant past the Grand Salon last night. You blink. Whole bird, he confirms. Feathers and all. It wore a hat. This seems unlikely. Feathered hat, Claude clarifies. Disguise. You nod as if this explains everything. He lowers his voice even more. And the Queen asked for strawberries again. Out of season. You know what that means. You don't. It means someone has a greenhouse. Or a time machine. Or a fondness for exaggeration, but you let that go. This is how the day begins at Versailles when you've joined the underbelly. You're no longer just a courtier or a chamber resident. You're a participant in something ancient, sacred, and slightly sticky, the art of nocturnal snacking. But snacks don't come from nowhere. They come from a kitchen. And kitchens, post-curfew, are silent tombs of temptation. Vast spaces filled with dormant stoves, locked cabinets, and rows of glazed pastries that must not be touched, each one more fragile and forbidden than royal lineage. Versailles Royal Kitchen was one of the largest in Europe at the time. Staffed by hundreds, its rooms spanned nearly a football field's worth of space beneath the palace's southern wing. There were rooms for sauces. Rooms for roasts. Rooms for things that were too weird to name. But when the clock struck a certain hour, usually just after the final course at supper, those rooms were sealed. Not physically, of course, but by rule. No fire was to be lit. No ladle lifted. No jam unsealed. The only food allowed after supper was medicinal. Broths. Tonics. Liquids so bland they made water look adventurous. But even here, in this desert of flavor, a loophole was born. Enter the butter heist of 1727. Historians still argue whether it was an act of rebellion or just a dairy accident, but the story goes like this. One cook, desperate to ease his rheumatism, claimed he needed warm butter as part of a traditional ointment. He lit a small fire, melted a dollop, and then, possibly by accident, spilled the rest over a stale roll, which he then ate. Word got out. Butter became the miracle ingredient for all ailments. Cook's elbow? Butter. Emotional fatigue? Butter. Shyness at court? Butter, obviously. This loophole opened the door to 1,000 late-night creations. Of course, it had to be subtle. A croissant wasn't called a croissant. It was a flaky digestive poultice. A tart was a syrup-cured sleep aid. A caramel apple? Fruit wrapped in a cough suppressant. And so the language of snacks evolved. You return to your room now, a little wiser and considerably hungrier. You pass the maid who doesn't look at you, but adjusts her apron just so, a silent message. She's part of it too. Later that evening you find the clue. Not on a tray. Not beneath your pillow. But embroidered into the hem of your napkin at supper. A tiny yellow strawberry. Barely noticeable. Definitely not a factory standard. You fold the napkin twice, pocket it, and excuse yourself with the kind of gentle sigh that says, I'm thinking about Enlightenment philosophy, not I'm about to risk my standing for a piece of rhubarb pie. That's how it works. Every movement is a cover. Every glance a question. And every servant, you now realize, is playing a game they've mastered far better than the nobility above them. Because while the palace staff may not wear brocade, they know every door that sticks, every corridor that echoes, every step that creaks just slightly to the left. They've memorized Versailles like a musician knows their instrument, right down to the part that makes a lovely noise when filled with jam. And you? You're still a novice. A spoon in the pocket beginner. But tonight maybe you'll be more. You light a single candle. You listen. You wait for the scratch at the door. The game has begun again. You don't have to wait long. Just past midnight, when the last hard note from the salon has dissolved into the velvet walls, it arrives. The scratch. Soft. Rhythmic. Exactly 3 times. Followed by a pause, then one final scrape. This is not a mouse. This is choreography. You're already dressed. Not in anything scandalous, just a robe of acceptable decency and slippers that don't squeak. Versailles was not built for subtlety, but your shoes are your allies now. You slip to the door. Open it a hand's width. No one. But just beyond, leaning with casual elegance against the base of a gilded pedestal, which is currently supporting an urn depicting the death of some overly dramatic shepherd, there's a folded card. Cream-colored, slightly crinkled, and, more importantly, slightly warm. You unfold it. On the inside, written in a fine, looping hand. Room 113, Green Wing. Crumbs will guide you. Beneath the note is the real gift, a sliver of orange peel, candied, curled like punctuation, dusted with something suspiciously floral. You chew slowly, allowing the flavor to blossom on your tongue, bitter, sweet, and full of possibility. You don't know who's leaving these. You don't ask. That would ruin the fun. Tonight's journey is to room 113. Which means navigating the palace by memory, by moonlight, and by snack debris. You start with the corridor outside your door, where a faint glint near the wainscot reveals a single crumb. Possibly tart. Possibly brioche. Impossible to tell. But definitely not accidental. You crouch. Follow it. There's another near the foot of the tapestry that shows Louis XIV with a lion. A third beneath a bust of someone important whose name no one quite remembers. He might have been an astronomer. Or a baker. Or both. It's like a fairy tale written in flower. The palace at night is a different creature. Gone are the courtiers with their endless layers of lace and complaint. Gone are the musicians, the lecturers, the duelists with opinions about cheese. What remains is silence. And floorboards. And the warm scent of something having recently been heated where it should not have been. You pass through the green wing archway, where the wallpaper has been peeling for 50 years and is considered historic for doing so. A single candle flickers from behind a curtain, an error, or a signal. You don't stop to check. Instead, you follow a small trail of pistachio dust, fine, green, unmistakably from the court's favored nut-stuffed biscuits. You pass 2 sleeping footmen and an open book of horoscopes. Curious. Finally you arrive. Room 113. It's not what you expect. No lavish furnishings. No velvet chaise. No portrait of a weeping shepherdess or smugly reclining marsupial. Just a side chamber, modest, cozy, and currently housing a very old woman peeling plums with surgical precision. She doesn't look up. You're early, she says, which is odd, since you're certain you're late. She gestures to the chair across from her, where a slice of tart sits cooling. It glistens. The kind of glisten that only comes from knowing something is about to be devoured reverently. You sit. She doesn't offer her name. She simply slides the plate forward and says the crust was meant to fail. But it didn't. You don't fully understand, but you nod anyway. Because that's how it works in Versailles. Conversations aren't about clarity. They're about performance. She tells you about the early days, when snack smuggling wasn't yet elegant. When it involved more bread than brilliance. When people still got caught because they couldn't help but leave jam prints on banister rails. Back then, it wasn't art. It was desperation. She was there. The Plum Lady, as you now mentally title her, describes the first ever snack ring, which was really just 3 bored chambermaids and 1 rogue stable boy who liked cinnamon. They operated with almost laughable clumsiness, hiding apples inside boot-polished tins and transporting cream in powder puffs. They failed constantly, she says with a fond grimace. But they failed with flavor. She bites into a plum. Doesn't flinch. You'll need a cover story, if you want to last, she says finally. Everyone does. You ask carefully what hers was. She smiles. For the first time. Hairbrush inspections. You're confused. I used to carry a silver brush to the kitchens every night, she explains, claiming to check for lice. No one asked questions? I always returned with a bun in the bristles. This is, frankly, genius. She tells you others used equally ridiculous methods. One woman carried a sketchbook, claiming to be recording mold growth for scientific purposes, and instead collected moldy cheese samples from under cupboards. Another pretended to be fascinated by temperature variances in different parts of the palace and hid eclairs inside thermometers. Historians still argue whether these accounts are embellished. But you believe every word. Because in this palace, ridiculous things make the most sense. You finish the tart. It's perfect. Warm but not scalding. Sweet but not cloying. The kind of dessert that makes you briefly forget the social consequences of being found with it. The Plum Lady rises with surprising elegance, wraps the pit of her fruit in a lace handkerchief, and disappears through a hidden panel behind the fireplace. Just like that. You're alone. No instructions. No further clues. Just a lingering taste of almond and a faint scent of lavender smoke. It's late now. You could go back. Slide into your bed, pretend none of this ever happened, and smile at your reflection like someone who doesn't know about secret apricot tunnels. But instead you stay seated. Because you're beginning to understand something very important. The true power at Versailles never came from titles. It came from access. And you, darling listener, now have it. You leave room 113 with the tart still clinging to your taste buds and the vague unease of someone who has eaten an entire metaphor without knowing it. The Plum Lady didn't give you instructions, but she gave you something better, initiation. The unsaid kind? The kind written in crumbs and exit doors that used to be fireplaces. Back in the corridor, the palace exhales. You didn't realize how tightly everything had been coiled until now. It's as if the walls themselves have decided you're in on the joke, and from here forward, they might just bend a little more gently in your favor. You walk. Not aimlessly, but not toward anything in particular. And as you round the corner near the Hall of Minor Portraits, a real place, mostly featuring noblemen with underwhelming accomplishments and powerful sideburns, you notice something odd. The floor is sticky. Not scandalous sticky. More syrupy. You glance down. Sure enough, a fine trail of caramel drops glistens faintly in the moonlight, leading toward a narrow passage you're almost certain wasn't on any official map. You follow it, obviously. Because this is Versailles. If you ever come across a suspicious trail of caramel, you follow it. The passage winds between linen closets and forgotten salons until you find yourself in front of a small, weathered door marked with a brass plaque that reads, "Inventory, spoons, miscellaneous." You push it open. Inside is not a spoon closet. It's a room that looks like someone tried to host a tea party inside a library and forgot to invite anyone sober. There are mismatched chairs, 5 teapots, 3 of which are actively steaming despite no visible source of heat, and a large portrait of a marmot wearing a tricorn hat. It's unclear whether it's ironic. And in the middle of this improbable gathering space stands a girl in a footman's uniform, except the buttons are sugared almonds and her pocket square is literally a napkin folded into a swan. She raises an eyebrow at you, but in the friendly, "Yes, I see you also ate the plum tart" sort of way. "You're early," she says. This is becoming a theme. "I'm supposed to be in room 113, you reply, "just to see what happens." She shrugs. "That's the warm-up room." You sit. Because standing would only draw attention to the fact that you have no idea what's going on. And sitting is what people do here, apparently, especially when surrounded by caramel trails and steaming kettles. The girl pours 2 cups of something that smells like toasted bread and wildflowers. You sip. It tastes exactly like a memory you can't quite place. "Name's Agath," she says. "Snack liaison." You blink. "You're part of the network now," she continues. "That means there are rules. Mostly to keep us from turning into a pile of jam and treason." You nod. "That seems fair." She begins ticking off rules on candy-colored fingers. Rule 1. Don't steal from the royals. Only the leftovers. We're rebels, not revolutionaries. Noted. Rule 2. Never leave a trail unless you mean to. Breadcrumbs are for beginners. Caramel is for statements. You glance at the sticky floor. She winks. Rule 3. If anyone asks, you've been rehearsing an interpretive dance in the linen hall. It worked once. It'll work again. Is that how you explain the almond buttons? You ask. She glances down at her uniform. Oh, these? These are fashion. She leans closer. Now, the kitchens. They're locked. Officially. But there's a way in. And if you're willing to help, we need a lookout tonight. There's a shipment of honey arriving from the orangery, and the bees are unionizing, so things are a little tense. You nod again, because you're not entirely sure how to refuse without accidentally losing your place in whatever weird, sweet-smelling underworld this is. She grins. Good. Bring your spoon. Meet at the statue of Bacchus missing a toe. Then she's gone, out a door behind the marmot painting, which swings gently shut with the faintest whiff of cinnamon. You're alone again. But now you've got a role. An assignment. You've graduated from crumb follower to official lookout for the midnight honey run. Somewhere between reckless and delicious. That's your new job description. You exit the room and retrace your steps, careful not to step in the caramel this time. You pause at the corner where the light hits a vase shaped like an onion. Versailles, you think, is entirely too fond of thematic pottery. You take a side passage, then a stair, then another hall, until you reach him. The statue. Bacchus. God of wine, revelry, and now, missing toes. He's located in a forgotten corner of the south terrace, half shaded by an overgrown pomegranate tree, and currently hosting a small bird on his toga fold. The toe is indeed gone, and someone has replaced it with what looks like a crystallized sugar cube. This has to be the spot. You wait. And as you do, you begin to understand how this world works. Versailles during the day is rigid, hierarchical, bursting at the seams with ceremony and starch. But at night, it's loose, warm, human, and deeply, gloriously silly. This isn't just about snacks. It's about claiming small joy in a system that forgets you exist after supper. It's about sugar as solidarity. A slice of tart as rebellion. A honey jar as proof that you still have a say in what your tongue gets to enjoy. Thank you very much. The wind rustles the pomegranate leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a lute hits a sour note. And you? You stand, spoon in pocket, waiting for the mission to begin. The air smells faintly of honey. An adventure. The moment arrives not with drums or whispers, but with the soft, unmistakable clatter of wheels on gravel. You crouch behind the base of Bacchus's marble pedestal, which smells faintly of moss and sugar cubes, and peer into the shadowed stretch of courtyard just beyond the pomegranate tree. There it is. A cart. Not fancy. Nothing gilded or excessively ruffled, just plain wood, pulled by a donkey who looks like it's seen some things. On the driver's bench sits a young man wearing what appears to be a powdered wig constructed entirely from straw. He's chewing something thoughtfully and humming what might be a lullaby or a protest anthem. The cart itself is piled high with crates. Bees buzz lazily around the edges. You blink. There are actually bees. Of course there are. It's Versailles. If there's honey involved, they insist on adding realism. From behind a pillar, Agathe materializes. No caramel trail this time. Her almond-buttoned coat now sports a bright orange sash, which you realize is not fashion but an identification signal. She waves you over with a flick of the wrist so precise it must have been trained in front of a mirror. You move in sync, step lightly, keep low. The air is thick with jasmine, candle smoke, and the soft frustration of a violinist still practicing somewhere very far away. Agathe gestures to the cart. 2 crates, she whispers. 1 for the royal kitchens. 1 for us. They'll never notice. You raise an eyebrow. They won't notice missing honey? She grins. They never notice anything when it's labeled for the wine reduction. We just slip in a little extra reduction. The driver hops down, stretches in an exaggerated manner, and promptly begins removing his boots. This, it seems, is part of the plan. Agathe explains, Jacques here is our distraction. He'll claim he's delivering honey and looking for a lost slipper. You glance at Jacques' feet. He has no slippers. Exactly. As Jacques limps dramatically toward the servant entrance, crying out in increasingly baroque detail about his missing footwear, silk-lined, embroidered by my grandmother, blessed by a parrot, Agathe hands you a jar. It's still warm. The glass is slightly sticky, and the lid bears a wax seal that reads simply, Private, Storage G. Hold on to this, she says. This is the special stuff. Goes in the secret cabinet under the candied chestnuts. You are now, apparently, a curator of elite midnight honey. Agathe leads you around the side of the kitchens, where a servant door stands slightly ajar. It smells of roasted nuts, thyme, and rules being lightly ignored. Inside it's quiet. Still warm from the earlier feast. The surfaces are polished, the utensils hung in sacred rows. But there are footprints in the floured dust on the floor, one of them a very small size that somehow makes you think of the plum lady. You smile. This is no longer just a kitchen. This is an archive of snack rebellion. Agathe heads straight for a shelf behind the drying herbs. She taps a knot in the wood twice. A small latch clicks. A panel slides back. You stare. Inside is what can only be described as a honey gallery. 6 jars of varying shades, from pale amber to near molasses. Each labeled not with flavors, but with moods. Regretful spring. Unnecessary desire. Apology, lightly toasted. Thursday. You ask, because you have to, what is Thursday? Agathe tilts her head. Sticky. Slightly smoky. Tastes like being late to a fencing lesson. You nod solemnly. That checks out. You place your jar, still labeled Private, Storage G, on the top shelf. Its seal glints. It smells faintly of lemon and risk. Agath closes the panel. And with that, the mission is complete. Almost. There's one more step. Always one more. She opens a drawer, pulls out a flat square tin with delicate hinges, and removes 2 slender, golden wafers. She hands you one. For the nerves, she says. And because Thursdays are best followed by something crisp. You bite. The wafer is impossibly thin. Light. Not overly sweet, but elegant. It cracks with a sound you wish you could wear as a brooch. Somewhere deep in your soul, a violin thanks you. And then, it's over. You exit the kitchen with the same silence you entered. Jacques, now barefoot and beaming, gives you a jaunty wave before clambering back onto the cart. One of the bees rides with him. You and Agath head in opposite directions, no words exchanged. That's how it works. No thank yous. No see you tomorrows. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing a jar is safe, a secret is kept, and a snack has been earned. On your way back through the corridor, you spot a crumb. Almond. A trail, if you wanted to follow it. But tonight you don't. You've had your share. You've carried the honey. You've eaten the wafer. You've survived Jacques' performance. You're content. You return to your room, where the fire has burned down to soft orange embers. You don't need light. Your eyes have memorized the dark. Your stomach is happy. Your soul smells like toasted sugar. You slide into bed. And as you pull the covers up, something shifts beneath your pillow. You reach under. It's a small sachet, delicately tied with string, filled with what appears to be candied ginger and a single violet petal. No note. But you know exactly who sent it. Because now you're part of the pantry. And the pantry remembers. You wake slowly, the violet petal still pressed between your fingers, now slightly crumpled from the night's dreams. Or perhaps the ginger's warmth has simply lingered in your palm. Either way, you don't move right away. Not because you're tired, though Versailles has a way of exhausting even the most languid, but because you're listening. Listening for the clues only heard before the rest of the palace stirs. A faraway clink of cutlery from the lower scullery. A faint rustle of petticoats swishing in the hallway. Too early to be official. Possibly a courier. Possibly just Madame de Beaufort chasing her cat again. Hard to say. But then, unmistakably, you hear it, 3 quick knocks, a pause, then 2 slower ones. A different signal this time. You rise, find your slippers, left neatly beside the bed in an act of quiet coordination that's either kindness or espionage, and tiptoe to the door. A folded paper has been slid halfway under it. Thicker than usual. Smells slightly of licorice and ink. You pick it up, unfold it, and find a single sentence written in perfectly upright, overly confident calligraphy. We require your eyes. Apron decoding at noon. Beneath this message, smaller handwriting has added. Bring tea if possible. The strong kind. You stare at the note. Apron decoding is not a phrase you expected to read before breakfast. You slip it into your dressing gown and prepare for the morning under the hazy veil of mild curiosity and jam-induced déjà vu. By the time the noon bell chimes, you've had 2 half-cups of coffee, 1 dry biscuit disguised as a scone, and overheard 3 conflicting rumors. That a priest was caught hoarding dried cherries in the chapel. That the Queen refused to appear in public because her lemon tart was slightly overbaked. That someone, possibly you, has been seen sneaking into the kitchen at odd hours and might be a spy for the Dutch. You choose to ignore that last one. Instead, you head toward the linen courtyard, where kitchen servants often congregate under the pretense of sun-bleaching aprons but really gather to share the kind of gossip that fuels snack diplomacy. There, sitting on a turned-over craton near a pile of folded cloth, is Babette, the chief apron mistress. Yes, it's a real role. Babette is small, sprightly, and gives the impression that if she wanted to, she could fold time itself into a triangle and pin it with a clove. She waves you over without looking up. Sit. Watch. No questions yet. You obey. Before you lies a row of aprons, neatly laid out, side by side, as though preparing for inspection. each one different in small but intentional ways. One has a lace corner tucked backward. Another has a pocket with an extra seam. One, curiously, has what looks like a tiny embroidered fig in the lower right hem. You squint. Babette taps your hand lightly. Look. Don't squint. That's how they know you're not native. Native to what? To the guild, she says, as though that explains everything. Apparently, in Versailles, even apron folding has levels of secrecy. She gestures toward the fig-embroidered apron. This one? That's a dinner request. Pigeon and honey. Extra sauce. 2 spoons. You nod because this seems both perfectly reasonable and utterly absurd. She points to the one with the inside-out hem. That one's a warning. Usually about boiled eggs. What kind of warning? Emotional. Structural. Existential. It varies. Babette then lifts a third apron and turns it slightly in the light. You see it now, 3 faint stitches, like a whisper in thread. That one, she says, means someone's coming. Someone important. Someone who hasn't had dessert in 3 days and may be willing to burn this whole palace down for a flan. You gasp quietly. She folds the apron carefully, precisely. You'll learn the language, she says. They all do, eventually. It's in the folds. You're handed an apron to decode yourself. Plain. White. Slightly frayed. Nothing remarkable. You examine the corners. The ties. The hem. And then you spot it. A crease, not symmetrical, but deliberate, folded at an angle that shouldn't happen unless intentional. Hidden along the inside edge, a stitch shaped like a soft, spiral G. You glance at Babette. She smiles faintly. Ginger, you say? Correct. Someone's asking for more ginger? No, someone's offering it. And they want a response. By supper. You sit back, mildly stunned. Historians still argue whether these systems were widespread or isolated to eccentric pockets of Versailles, but one thing is certain. Information traveled fastest not through letters or lips, but through linen. Babette gathers the aprons and begins folding them into elegant bundles, each one a soft declaration of intent. You'll want to write back, she says, handing you a handkerchief and a needle. Me? She nods. You're part of the pantry now. And the pantry has manners. You embroider slowly. Carefully. 1 spiral G. A small star. 2 diagonal dots. It's not perfect. But it's something. A language you didn't know you spoke until today. You leave the handkerchief on the edge of the fountain beside the herb garden. You don't wait to see who picks it up. Later, when you return to your room, there's a new note tucked into your book of poems. It reads, Crusts are crisp. Tongues are loyal. Meet beneath the olive jars at moonrise. And beneath that, a tiny stitched spiral. The pantry, it seems, has heard you. The olive jars in question are not the practical, food storage type. No, this is Versailles. These jars are decorative, imposing, and entirely empty, painted porcelain giants arranged in symmetrical clusters around the southern loggia. Each is the size of a carriage wheel and painted with improbable images of pastoral olives cavorting in vaguely romantic ways. You arrive just as the moon lifts high enough to cast a silvery sheen on the cobbled terrace. The jars loom like oversized chess pieces abandoned by a whimsical god. You walk slowly between them, careful not to trip on a dislodged tile shaped like a lemon wedge. A cough from behind the tallest jar alerts you. You pause. Step closer. And there, leaning nonchalantly against the base of the jar, arms crossed, a sprig of rosemary tucked behind one ear, is Henri. You've heard of him. Henri of the spoons. Rumor says he once fed an entire masked ball with nothing but a pouch of candied nuts and a spoon tied to his ankle. He allegedly carved coded messages into toast crusts. Some say he trained a pigeon to deliver shortbread. Others say he was the pigeon. It's hard to know where myth ends and meringue begins. He nods in greeting, then gestures for silence. From the shadows emerges a third figure, Lisette, the woman known only in pantry whispers as the infusionist. Her specialty is teas, soothing, invigorating, or mischievously soporific. It said she once brewed a blend so calming it caused the Minister of Architecture to sleep through his own groundbreaking ceremony. She hands each of you a tiny ceramic cup, no bigger than a thimble. The liquid inside is deep purple and smells like lavender and old secrets. Henri raises his cup. To crusts and codes. You clink gently. Sip. The tea is warm, slightly bitter, and leaves a faint tingling on your tongue, like you've just agreed to something you don't fully understand. Lisette speaks at last. You wrote back, she says. You nod. The pantry noticed, she continues. And we need someone like you. Tonight's task is delicate. Of course it is. Henri unfurls a small, grease-spotted parchment. It's a map. Of sorts. You recognize part of it. The corridor near the eastern wing, close to the tapestry gallery that always smells faintly of onions and powdered sugar. There's a delivery, he says. 3 pastries. All identical. One is filled with pear and almond, as it should be. One is filled with mustard, which is a crime. The third contains the note. You blink. The note? The pastry note, Lisette clarifies. It's how we communicate with the sellers. You don't ask what the sellers refers to. You don't need to. The way she says it, with just enough drama to curl the air around it, suggests mystery, mischief, and probably meat pies. Henri rolls up the map. Your task is simple. Collect the pastries. Taste them. Find the one with the note. Deliver it. Where? To the woman in the red slippers. Which woman? He shrugs. She'll be the one with red slippers. Helpful. They vanish into the night the way seasoned snack smugglers do, without sound, without fuss, and possibly without touching the ground. You're left with the map, a faint sugar crust at the edge of your teacup, and a growing sense that Versailles has more secret pathways than it has chandeliers, and it has a lot of chandeliers. You head for the corridor marked on the parchment. Along the way, you pass a footman carrying a tray of empty saucers and whistling a tune that sounds suspiciously like God Save the Apricot. He winks as you pass. You reach the tapestry gallery just as the grandfather clock near the billiard salon strikes 1, a sound like someone politely knocking on a drum. There, waiting on a small table beside an arrangement of drooping lilies, are the pastries. 3 of them. Perfectly round. Glazed. Identical. You pick one up. Gently squeeze. Too soft. You pick up the second. Firm but light. Promising. The third has a faint scent of something herbal. Rosemary, perhaps. Or plot. You nibble the edge of the first. Mustard. Immediate regret. Your eyes water slightly. The second is blissful. Pear and almond. The taste of good decisions. The third, when you bite into it, releases a tiny crunch. Inside the center is not fruit, but paper. Waxed dry, and neatly folded. You slide it out, unfold it with the care one usually reserves for lost love letters or very old recipes. The note is simple. Elegant cursive. No names. No greetings. Reheat the chestnuts. The left one has the answer. Do not serve cold. You stare at it. Versailles logic, you remind yourself. Nothing ever means what it says, unless it does, and even then, it probably doesn't. You fold the note back up, tuck it into your sleeve, and head toward the South Garden Terrace, the one favored by ladies with very specific footwear. It doesn't take long. Near the marble bench where people often pretend to admire the clouds while discussing infidelity, stands a woman in a plum-colored dress. She's wearing gloves. A ribbon. And yes, red slippers. She sees you. Says nothing. Just lifts her teacup slightly. You hand her the note. She opens it. Reads. Smiles faintly. Then, from her reticule, she pulls a small cloth-wrapped bundle. She passes it to you without a word. Inside, you later discover, are candied chestnuts still warm. The kind of warmth that says, message received. She walks away, slippered feet barely scuffing the stones. You sit on the bench for a moment, letting the night wind press gently against your face. Somewhere nearby, someone is laughing Lightly, faintly, the kind of laugh shared over something sweet and entirely forbidden. You've tasted mustard. You've cracked a note open like a pastry piñata. You've met the woman in the red slippers. And somewhere in the shadowy kitchens of Versailles, someone is already folding an apron that will send the next message. You stand. Crumbs on your lap. Sugar on your fingers. The pantry is speaking. And you're listening. You've barely returned to your room, fingers still faintly sticky from chestnut glaze, when you notice the corner of your rug is folded up. That's not right. Your room is many things, lavish, absurdly symmetrical, vaguely overperfumed. But untidy? Never. Versailles doesn't believe in coincidence or creases. You crouch. Lift the rug. Beneath it, a playing card. Face up. The Queen of Spades, carefully pressed and almost impossibly clean. Along the bottom edge someone has written, very small, "She knows." You sit back on your heels. Well, that's ominous. But at Versailles, ominous is just another flavor, served with a side of whipped mystery and a garnish of dramatic lighting. You tuck the card into your pocket. As you rise, a movement catches your eye. In the mirror. Something not in the room, but behind you. You turn. Nothing. Just the drapes. Swaying faintly, though no windows are open. Still, something's shifting in the undercurrent tonight. The pantry's rhythm has changed. You aren't just following the snack trail anymore, you're becoming part of its shape. By morning, the message arrives. This time, it's not a note or a crumb or a suspicious pastry. It's a lemon. Perfect. Bright. Sitting in your slipper. The kind of lemon that isn't just a fruit. At Versailles, a lemon like this is a metaphor. An invitation. Possibly a threat, but more likely a request. You carry it to breakfast like it's a priceless jewel. The dining room is as it always is, chaotic in the quietest way. A dozen nobles sipping chocolate or nibbling toast while pretending not to notice each other. Gossip woven through yawns. You spot Delphine, the marquise of something complicated, stirring her tea aggressively, the way someone does when they've heard too much and eaten too little. You sit beside her. Slide the lemon onto her saucer. She doesn't look up. Just murmurs, "Ah. So she chose you." This raises several questions. But you swallow them politely, instead accepting the cup of spiced tea she pushes toward you. You sip. It tastes clandestine, with undertones of citrus and danger. Delphine leans in. There's a banquet tonight. You know. Of course. Everyone knows. The Dauphin's named 4 courses. Possibly 5, if the oysters behave. But, she continues, there's been a theft. The orange blossom syrup is missing. You pause mid-sip. That's serious. The orange blossom syrup is used in nearly everything. Glazes. Sauces. Secret eyebrow tonic. She taps your lemon. They think the pantry has it. Well, that's complicated. You glance around the room, half expecting the mirrors to blink. Versailles has a way of listening with its architecture. Delphine continues, they'll search rooms today. Maybe yours. You try not to look panicked. Don't worry, she says. You'll receive assistance. And with that, she lifts her spoon, begins eating her soup, and offers no further explanation. Classic Versailles. You leave breakfast with the uneaten lemon still in your pocket, and a growing suspicion that your room may no longer be a safe zone for experimental snacks and coated handkerchiefs. You're right. By the time you return, a maid is already inside. She's not touching anything. Not technically. But she's examining. Deeply. She's holding one of your books open, Treatises on Culinary Deductions, Volume 2. Not a popular title. Not even a real one. You made the cover yourself. Inside is where you've been storing spoon diagrams. She looks up, doesn't smile. Unusual bookmark, she says, holding up a folded tart recipe written in lemon-scented ink. You shrug. I like to snack while reading. She gives a small hum and replaces the book. Leaves without comment. But you know what this is, a warning. They're close. Someone's realized the pantry isn't just a quirky rumor, it's a system. A network. Possibly a movement. And someone doesn't like that. By evening, you receive a second message, this time through your hairbrush. It's been cleaned aggressively. All the bristles replaced. Hidden among them, a note curled like a cinnamon twist. The syrup's safe. But there's a spy. Of course there is. You dress for the banquet with your mind racing. Somewhere between your third waistcoat option and your fourth sigh, you make a decision. You're going to protect the pantry. You're going to find the spy. And you're going to eat dessert while doing it. The banquet is held in the Hall of Mirrors, because of course it is. The space glows with candelabras and potential scandal. Everyone's dressed like a fever dream. Wigs feathered. Breeches embroidered. Sleeves with more fabric than logic. You sit beside a count who smells faintly of vinegar and regret. Across the room, you spot familiar faces. Henri, sipping soup without breaking eye contact. Agathe, chatting too casually with the diplomat. The plum lady, dressed as a floral centerpiece. The first course arrives. Nose syrup. The second, fish, served in an elaborate sauce that tastes like someone described citrus to a potato. Still nose syrup. And then the third. Duck. Glazed. You raise your spoon. Taste. Your tongue confirms what your soul already suspected. Orange blossom. They found it. Or rather, someone returned it. But who? And why? You glance around. Agathe's expression doesn't change. Henri nods at his plate. The plum lady eats a radish with terrifying intensity. And then, across the hall, you spot her. The maid from your room. Only now, she's not in uniform. She's seated among the guests. Wearing red slippers. She catches your eye. Smiles. Raises her glass. And just before she sips, you notice the lemon wedge perched on the rim. The message is clear. She's pantry. You're safe. For now. After the banquet, you don't return to your room. Because by now you've learned that returning to one's room, especially after the orange blossom syrup has been mysteriously returned, and a known pantry infiltrator has toasted you with a lemon wedge, is the Versailles equivalent of walking into a mousetrap wearing jammed shoes. Instead, you slip quietly into the southern arcade, beneath the gallery of oil paintings where all the eyes seem to follow you but none know what you're up to. You've grown fond of this corridor. It smells faintly of lavender polish, and the echoes here are more respectful. You're not alone for long. A soft footstep. Then another. From the far side of the archway, Lisette appears. She's holding a stack of teacups, because of course she is. Each one a different shade of blue. She stops when she sees you. There you are, she says. I was worried you got swallowed by the soup. You nod. There was definitely something predatory about it. She chuckles. You made it through. That's what matters. She steps beside you and sets the teacups gently on a window ledge. The moonlight catches on one, glazed with faint gold leaf in the shape of a squirrel. I need to show you something, she says, not looking at you. More syrup? She shakes her head. Worse. Or better. Depends on your fondness for turnips. You don't ask for clarification. That ship sailed several tarts ago. You follow her through a series of service staircases, each narrower and more slanted than the last, until you arrive in a low-ceilinged chamber just behind the palace conservatory. You can smell the citrus trees through the walls. The floor is packed earth, the walls lined with crates, and at the center of the room is a table. On the table, turnips. Many turnips. Too many turnips. But these aren't ordinary root vegetables. They're engraved. Each one has a name carved delicately into its skin. Lisette lifts one with care. This one's the Comtesse de Revel. You blink. Is she inside? Lisette laughs. Not literally. Symbolically. Of course. She places the turnip back down. These are the decoy names. The pantry's way of tracking suspicion. She gestures at the pile. Each turnip represents a person under watch. We rotate the engravings nightly. It keeps the spy network guessing. If someone discovers a name, they never know if it's a target or a distraction. You pick one up. Your name is not on it. Yet. That feels both comforting and disappointing. Lisette continues, we've noticed patterns. Every time one of these names appears in the pastry cycle, something goes missing. You consider that. So the spy's either choosing victims, or protecting them. She nods. That's the debate. Historians still argue whether this part of the pantry's tradition was a form of coded warning or passive-aggressive produce art. You return your turnip to the pile and dust your hands. What do we do next? Lisette looks at you, serious now. We bake. Naturally. Back through the conservatory, past the bored peacock sleeping under a lemon tree, into a side kitchen rarely used except for secret bread. There, waiting, is Claude. You remember him, the assistant to the assistant of the third confectioner, still convinced that whispering prevents cream from curdling. He nods once and opens the oven door. The heat is immediate. Comforting. Smells of cinnamon, flour, and betrayal. Lisette pulls a tray from the counter and begins assembling ingredients. Tonight's plan is simple. We bake 6 plum tarts. 1 for the Comtesse. 1 for the steward. 1 for the man with the parrot brooch. 1 for the librarian's cousin. 1 for the spy. And 1 for the distraction. You raise an eyebrow. Which is which? She grins. We won't know until they're delivered. As the crusts bake, you lean against the counter and sip a tisane Claude presses into your hand. It's infused with rosemary, thyme, and something that tastes vaguely of punctuality. Why plum tarts? You ask? Lisette shrugs. Because they're honest. Not flashy. Not overly tart. Just real. No one suspects them. But every single one of them hides a message. Claude, now wrapping pastries in embroidered cloth, whispers, also, the Queen hates them. That keeps the tension away. You nod slowly. So I'm delivering? Lisette smiles. Just one. The last one. To the Gallery of Clocks. A chill runs down your spine. The Gallery of Clocks is legendary. Not for its beauty, though the timepieces are exquisite, but for its acoustics. You can whisper in one corner and be heard clearly in another. Ideal for secrets. Or, in your case, desserts. You bundle the tart in its napkin, tie it with a ribbon too elegant for its station, and pocket the tiny card Claude slips into your palm. It reads tick. Tock. Not a word. Only crumbs. Dramatic but effective. You set off. The palace has quieted now. Post-banquet inertia has settled in. Nobles drift to card games, servants sweep invisible dust, and somewhere in the salons, a violinist saws out an ambitious aria to a largely unconscious audience. You reach the clock gallery just before the hour strikes 2. Inside, the ticking is soft but omnipresent. A symphony of precision. And there, beside a gilded grandfather clock shaped like a ship, stands a figure. She's turned away. Wearing a cloak the color of burnt sugar. No shoes. You step forward, hold out the tart. She doesn't take it. Instead, she says, "How do you like your eggs?" You answer instinctively. Soft-boiled, with pepper and a slice of quiet. She turns. It's Babette. Her expression is unreadable. She takes the tart. Opens it. Inside, instead of plum, is a single candied violet and a slip of lace. You passed, she says. And then, in a whisper so low it might have come from the floor itself, she adds, "But you're not the only one watching." You glance behind you. Nothing. The clocks tick on. Time, apparently, is also pantry-coded. The moment hangs. You and Babette, alone in a gallery filled with ticking clocks, lace in one hand and candied violet in the other. It's not clear whether you've just delivered a tart, received a warning, or accidentally been inducted into a pastry-themed espionage ring with time-based metaphors. Probably all three. Babette tucks the lace into her sleeve, like it's a letter too dangerous to read in public. Then she leans ever so slightly toward you. There's movement in the west pantry, she whispers, but not from us. Your stomach tightens, not from hunger but from the gnawing awareness that whatever is stirring in the shadows may be more than a snack syndicate. Something's wrong. We think someone's forming a counter-ring, she continues. One with no rules. No rituals. No understanding of etiquette. You gasp softly. No etiquette? She nods gravely. They steal. Waste. Mix jellied meats with custards. They don't label anything. You nearly drop your spoon. There's a silence between you now, filled only by the rhythm of timepieces ticking out secrets, like old friends tapping Morse on velvet cushions. She reaches into the folds of her cloak and removes a tiny booklet. It's bound in dried plum skin, inked with violet dye, and smells faintly of almond. This, she says, is the original pantry ledger? You take it reverently. It's lighter than you expect, worn smooth from decades of flour-dusted fingers. The first page bears the pantry's motto, scrawled in looping, conspiratorial calligraphy. In crust we trust. You smile. Then you see the list. Names. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Some marked with tiny symbols, spoons, crumbs, a mysterious pastry swirl. Many are unfamiliar, but a few stand out. Agath. Henri. Plum Lady. Delphine. Even Claude. And at the bottom, newly added, is yours. No symbol yet. Just your name. Crisp. Waiting to be flavored by time. You glance up. Babette is already walking away, fading into the clocks, leaving you holding history and a deep sense of responsibility wrapped in pastry parchment. Back in your room, at last, cautiously returned, you hide the ledger beneath your pillow. The room feels different now. The same damask walls, the same brocade curtains. But the air is thicker. The story more tangled. A soft knock interrupts your thoughts. You don't answer, just crack the door. A tray. With tea. And a note tucked beneath the saucer. You lift it carefully. It's short. 3rd floor. Linen stairs. Watch for the mirror that doesn't blink. There's no signature. But the handwriting is unmistakable. Lisette. You grab your coat and the smallest, least noisy pair of shoes you own. The linen stairs are rarely used. Tucked behind the southeast wing, they smell permanently of lavender and starch. You ascend quietly, footsteps echoing with the hush of long folded sheets and secrets whispered between napkins. At the landing you see it. A row of mirrors, all identical. Gilded frames. Dustless glass. Except one. You tilt your head. The 3rd mirror does not reflect your sleeve pin. You wave. The pin does not wave back. You touch the glass. It's warm. And it gives, just slightly. You push. It opens like a door. And beyond it, a passage. Narrow, slanted, and definitely not approved by any official Versailles architect. You step in. The air is dry, earthy, and smells faintly of cardamom and candle wax. You move forward, the mirror door clicking shut behind you. The tunnel slopes downward. You pass alcoves filled with baskets, apples wrapped in lace, jars of syrup bearing codes etched in cinnamon. One shelf holds nothing but empty crusts, perfectly preserved. Finally, you emerge into a chamber. Low ceiling, round, lit only by a ring of candles set into the floor. And in the center, a single table. Around it sit 7 figures. Only one turns to face you. The Queen of Spades. Not the card this time, but the woman who left it. And she is very real. She wears black silk, no jewelry, and the expression of someone who once baked a cake so perfect it caused a duel. You've come, she says. You nod, suddenly aware of your slightly crooked collar, and the fact that your hands still smell faintly of turnip. You're here because you've been noticed, she continues. Not just by us, but by them. She gestures to the wall, where a diagram hangs. It's rough, hand-drawn, and shaped like a tart sliced into quarters. One slice is shaded deep red. That, she says, is the unpantred. You frown. That can't be real. But she holds up a crust. Burnt. No etiquette, she says. No codes. They take what they want. They bake without purpose. You shudder. The room grows quiet. Then she leans forward. You must infiltrate, she says softly. You must taste what they taste. Know their methods. And if you can, recover what they've taken. You swallow. What have they taken? She reaches beneath the table. Lays down a velvet box. Opens it. Inside, a spoon. Gilded. Old. Faintly glowing. This, she says, is the first spoon. The one used to stir the very first plum preserve served in Versailles. It's tradition. It's memory. It's ours. You stare at the spoon. It hums with history. They want you to go in. Pretend to be one of the unpantred. Risk everything. For a spoon. You nod. Because by now, you understand, in Versailles, it's never just a spoon. You're given no time to pack, no list of supplies, no formal instructions, just a nod from the Queen of Spades and a folded handkerchief that smells faintly of cinnamon and responsibility. Apparently, when infiltrating a rogue pastry cell, subtlety is favored over strategy. You tuck the handkerchief into your coat, glance once more at the glowing spoon in its velvet box, and ask the obvious question. How will I find them? The Queen of Spades doesn't answer directly. She gestures to one of the silent figures at the table, a woman with a sugar-dusted braid and flower on her sleeves. This is Martine, you're told. Former pantry operative. Now your handler. She rises, slow and sure, and nods toward a narrow hallway behind the chamber. You follow without speaking, because Martine gives off the precise energy of someone who once caused a custard mutiny and won. We start with the sausage vendor, she says. You blink. Sorry? Martine stops and turns to face you. The unpantred don't meet in salons or kitchens. They use fringe vendors, those who hover just outside palace life. Street sellers, spice hawkers, the woman who walks goats around the moat. The sausage vendor's stall is a known first contact point. Of course it is. The two of you wind your way up a service staircase and emerge just outside the palace walls, where the stalls cluster in a semi-permanent bazaar of smells, chatter, and grease-stained deals. Martine moves with precision, weaving through throngs of lace-covered nobles pretending to slum it. There he is. The vendor. Short, wide, and wearing a mustard-colored scarf that likely wasn't dyed on purpose. His stand boasts exactly 3 sausages. One curved. One suspiciously straight. One already half-eaten. Martine steps up, taps twice on the edge of the cart, and murmurs, twice boiled, once betrayed. The vendor blinks. Grins. Reaches beneath the counter, and produces a napkin. Inside it, a biscuit. You stare. Martine nods. Eat it. You do. It's dry. Spiced oddly. Hints of fennel and, was that anchovy? The vendor watches your face. Then, satisfied, he says, follow the string of burnt lanterns. They'll be expecting you. You thank him, though you're not entirely sure for what. Martine gives you one last look. Don't speak in full sentences. Don't mention spoons. And whatever you do, don't comment on the butter. She disappears into the crowd. You are now officially unsupervised. The lanterns, 6 in total, hang from rusted iron hooks along a half-collapsed garden wall. Their glass is cracked. Inside each one, a smudge of soot and a faint smell of burned sugar. You follow them through the gate, past what was probably once a gooseberry patch, and into a crumbling conservatory now overtaken by vines and shadows. Inside, 4 figures sit around a wooden crate. They wear no uniforms, no matching sashes, no almond buttons. Their clothing is mismatched, their expressions wary. One of them sharpens a cheese knife. Another chews a raw radish. They do not look like pastry enthusiasts. You clear your throat. One figure, tall, cloaked, and wearing boots far too nice for this aesthetic, nods at you. You're late, they say. You shrug. The biscuit had opinions. That gets a twitch of a smile. The tallest waves you forward. Sit. You do. The crate you sit on wobbles slightly. Someone passes you a tin cup. The contents are murky, herbal, and taste like boiled melancholy. Name? Someone asks. You freeze. Think. Then answer Gaston. They nod. Of course you are. The tall one leans forward. You've been vetted. The vendor sent the signal. Now we test you. Another member, a woman with red-stained fingers and a jar of something unidentifiable in her lap, holds up a spoon. Not the spoon. Just a spoon. Plain. Wooden. Slightly chipped. Make a spread, she says. 5 ingredients. No sweeteners. Must balance. You look at what they have. A wedge of dry cheese. A jar of pickled turnip. A bowl of mashed chestnut. A single anchovy. A loaf of rye that may also be a weapon. Half a lemon. A sprig of rosemary. Something smoky in a tin labeled Simply Don't. You pause. Consider. And then you build. Mashed chestnut base. Anchovy minced and stirred into lemon juice. A thin shaving of cheese melted onto the rye. Rosemary just on the edge, no more than a whisper. You serve it on a piece of bark, because plates are clearly not welcome here. They taste. The woman with the red fingers raises an eyebrow. The tall one smiles. Acceptable. You are just like that inside. Sort of. The unpantred don't use names, but you start to identify them by quirks. Radish, who always chews loudly. Cheese knife, who keeps rearranging nearby objects by size. Don't tin, who whispers to it when they think no one's looking. Tall one, your apparent supervisor, who occasionally mutters in pastry code, but backwards. You learn fast. The unpantred operate on chaos. There are no pantry codes. No symbolism. No etiquette. No pastry honor. They make tarts with no filling. Bake without resting the dough. They once used onion skins in place of flour because they looked flaky enough. You fake your way through, claiming to be a ferment-forward crust anarchist, which earns you a seat at their next project, Operation Custard Cloud. It's not a dessert. It's a distraction. They're planning to release 200 steamed custards into the palace air vents during the next state dinner. Their logic? If everyone's inhaling egg, they won't notice the missing gold forks. You're impressed. And slightly horrified. You pretend to help stir, but your real task is clear. Find out where they're keeping the first spoon. And how to get it back. You're deep in the soft, wobbly belly of the unpantred now. And the clock is ticking. The deeper you burrow into the unpantred, the more you begin to understand that chaos isn't their weakness, it's their shield. There are no codes, no ranks, no written recipes. And yet, somehow, they operate like a flour-dusted hive. A disorganized, urban-fused swarm of improvisational bakers, flavor pirates, and dough philosophers. Your role becomes clearer. You're the new recruit with a good mouth-feel for deception, as Tall One describes it. Your job? Stir. Watch. And keep the lemon rinds from touching the fennel unless explicitly instructed. It's harder than it sounds. By your third night with them, the custard cloud is well underway. They've commandeered a forgotten steam chamber below the western larder, and someone, probably Cheese Knife, has repurposed a brass footbath into a custard vault. You offer to help with temperature control, which is code for poke around. You stir slowly, rhythmically, buying time while your eyes scan the room for anything spoon-shaped, gilded, or glowing faintly with pastry heritage. Nothing. But you do notice a set of crates in the far corner, unmarked, dusty, and definitely guarded by an unspoken rule that everyone avoids them. Your instincts stir faster than the custard. After the others drift off for their usual midnight root mash ceremony, don't ask, you double back. One crate is slightly ajar. Inside, linens. Thick ones. Beneath them, a box. Small. Wooden. Plain. You lift it. It hums. You don't need to open it to know. It's the first spoon. You're holding pastry history in your hands. And now you have a decision. But just as you begin to tuck the box into your coat, a voice behind you rasps, Sticky fingers ruin clean recipes. You freeze. It's don't tin. She steps out of the shadows, barefoot, holding her tin as if it might be alive. Her eyes narrow. You know what that is? You nod. Slowly. She sighs. I thought you might. You stir too neatly. You open your mouth to respond, but she holds up the tin. Shakes it once. The contents rattle like angry sugar cubes. Then she says something you don't expect. I don't want them to have it either. Now you're blinking. Then why? I'm keeping it hidden. Not for them. For balance. If the pantry has all the relics, the unpantred become jokes. And if the unpantred get the spoon, the pantry becomes a myth. It has to stay neutral. You glance at the box in your hands. The spoon deserves ceremony, you say. Don't tin nods. But not worship. You sit down on a barrel of barley crumbs. She lowers herself next to you. Tell me something, she says. What do they think happens if they get all the relics back? You think. They believe Versailles will remember. That balance will return. That taste itself might improve. She snorts. Taste never left. It just changed coats. You can't argue. The unpantred's methods are wild, yes, but occasionally they land on something spectacular. Like the peppered cherry tart that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Or the onion jam eclairs served with a whisper of dill. So, what now? You ask. She takes the box gently. You take back a fake. You raise an eyebrow. She opens her tin. Inside is another spoon, dull, wooden, carved from driftwood or possibly an old ladle. She tucks the real spoon back into her tin and hands you the copy. Same weight. Close shape. No hum. You nod. Tuck it into your coat. Tell them you had to fight off a bat, she says, standing. It'll make you look heroic. You laugh. Just a little. But she's already disappearing into the dark again, muttering something to her tin that sounds suspiciously like, he's got a good custard arm, though. You return to the pantry's side before dawn, slipping in through a side corridor still damp with condensation from the custard cloud preparations. Henri is waiting. He holds out a napkin. Proof? You unwrap the fake spoon. His eyes widen. He doesn't touch it, but he gives a low whistle. Looks real, he murmurs. Smells like misdirection. You nod. I had to fight off a bat. Henry's mouth twitches. Of course you did. You debrief quickly. Tell them what you've seen, heard, almost eaten. Babette arrives halfway through and listens with folded arms, nodding at intervals like a general inspecting the troops before battle, or a headmistress evaluating soup. When you finish, she says simply, we have what we need. But we wait. We let them think they still hold the real spoon. Their movements will tell us what they value most. You nod. Then pause. What happens if they find out it's a fake? Babette doesn't hesitate. Then we make it real. Cryptic. But in line with everything you've learned so far. Later, in your room, you light a small candle and open your ledger, the plum-skin one. Under your name, someone has added a symbol at last. Not a spoon. Not a crumb. A biscuit. Simple. Honest. Breaks easily, but always comes back together with tea. You smile. There's a knock at your door. Not coded. Just one soft knock. You open it. Lisette is standing there, holding a teacup. Want to see something strange? She asks. Always. You follow her through the service halls, down into the cooler wing beneath the musicians' quarters. There's a door you've never noticed before. Inside, a room full of scent. Not food. Not herbs. Paper. Scrolls. Dozens of them. All recipes. Old. Forgotten. Annotated. The recipe vault, she says. Every flavor that's ever gone missing. You walk through stunned. Vanilla-soaked parchments. Scrolls with sauce formulas from dynasties that crumbled before sugar even arrived in Europe. Margins filled with notes like add plum, trust me, or burn twice for best crust. At the far end, an empty shelf. This, she says, is where the spoon's recipe goes. When we get it back. You don't tell her it's already safe. She doesn't ask. Sometimes secrecy is sweeter than truth. The whispering pantry doesn't officially exist. Not in the inventories, not in the blueprints, not even in the gossip. And yet you find yourself walking toward it in the middle of the night, guided only by the smell of cloves and a particularly creaky floorboard near the statue of Louis XII's second-best hunting dog. It's not a pantry in the traditional sense. It's a room behind a wall behind a spice rack, and once you pass through the narrow doorway, barely wide enough to admit a person wearing even modest petticoats, you find yourself in a low, candlelit chamber, packed from floor to rafters with every forgotten ingredient and outdated spice you can imagine. Lavender from a lost vineyard, nutmeg wrapped in velvet, rose sugar molded into the shape of a bishop's nose. And at the center of the room, just beside a stack of expired almond paste bricks, is what you came for. The cheese drawer. Lizette called it the whispering pantry earlier, like everyone already knew what it meant. But only now, standing here in the quiet, do you understand why. The room hums. Not quite voices, but close, like the air remembers every conversation ever held in its presence. Like flour itself has memory. You step forward and reach for the cheese drawer handle. It's ornate, shaped like a camembert wedge, because of course it is. You pull. It opens without resistance. Inside, a note, folded with careful corners, resting atop a wedge of very soft brie and a sprig of thyme. You unfold it. The unpantred have found the garden gate. If they reach the orchard, we lose everything. Speak to the man with the cinnamon shoe. Do not look at his other foot. You read it 3 times before carefully refolding it and slipping it into your sleeve. You take the brie too. Because honestly, it would be rude not to. The garden gate. You've heard whispers. A hidden entrance to the Queen's private orchard, one that predates even the current layout of the palace. An ancient shortcut used during the reign of Henri IV to sneak cherries and privacy without courtly eyes. Said to be guarded by a puzzle? Possibly bees. And if the unpantred have found it, well, that would mean they have access to the rarest ingredients in the kingdom. Golden figs. White strawberries. The mythical truffle-thyme hybrids once served to only one archbishop before being declared too unholy. You leave the pantry by candlelight and make your way to the artisan stalls by the south colonnade. You don't need to ask where to find the man with the cinnamon shoe. Because when you see it, left foot, deep brown leather, dusted with actual cinnamon, you know. The other foot is obscured beneath a basket of leeks. You do not investigate. He looks up as you approach. Doesn't speak. You hand him a folded napkin. It's blank, save for a small doodle of a fig inside a padlock. He grunts. Then, using a leek as a stylus, he draws a quick map in the dust on his counter. 3 turns. A hidden hedge. A bench that moans like a goat when you sit on it. Evening, he says, and returns to sorting roots. You follow the instructions exactly. The moaning bench does, in fact, make a sound suspiciously goat-like. Behind it, a low wall, covered in ivy, and tucked between 2 stones, an iron key. You pocket it and continue until the hedge parts to reveal a tiny gate, so old it looks more grown than built. The garden gate. You unlock it. Step through. And you are in another world. The orchard glows in moonlight. Trees of every variety lean gently under the weight of fruits too perfect for realism. The air is thick with bees and nectar and nostalgia. You tread carefully, following the worn path until you hear it. A laugh. Too loud. Too confident. The unpantred are here. You crouch behind a quince bush and peek through the leaves. 5 figures. Unmistakable. Radish is juggling apricots. Cheese knife is gnawing on a cinnamon stick. Tall one is examining a fig like it owes him money. Don't Tin sits in the grass, humming to herself. They're gathered around a basket. Inside it, pears. But not just any pears. These are the Queen's whisper pears, named not because they whisper, though one did, once, during an eclipse, but because they bruise if you speak above a murmur in their presence. You watch as tall one lifts a pear and bites it, loudly. The fruit gives a squeak of protest and collapses in on itself. Radish gasps. They all freeze. Then the trees begin to shiver. A rustling, like paper being folded in anger. The orchard is waking up. You step out from behind the bush. No more spying. This is now a rescue. Drop the pears. You shout in your softest possible yell. The unpantred whirl. Tall one's eyes narrow. You hold up your hands. You're in the whisper grove. If they detect another raised voice. A tree shudders violently. They'll collapse their fruit and seal the orchard for a generation. Radish drops the pear. Gently. Don't Tin looks amused. What do you propose, Pantry? You take a breath. Trade. One favor. You leave now. Don't harvest. And I'll give you the missing ingredient. Cheese knife snorts. Which one? You reach into your coat. Pull out the brie. And the sprig of thyme. The brie from the whispering pantry, you say. And the thyme that's only ever rested next to it. Their mouths collectively water. Even tall one wavers. Don't Tin rises. Deal. You step forward. Place the cheese and thyme on a leaf. They retrieve it. Quietly. Reverently. Then, without another word, they vanish, slipping through the orchard like well-fed ghosts. You exhale. Turn back. And the trees relax. The orchard lives another day. And the pantry? It holds the line. As you walk back through the garden gate, you hear a voice. Soft. Not in your ear, but around you. The trees? The pantry? Impossible to say. But the message is clear. A fruit shared is diplomacy. A fruit stolen is war. Choose your basket wisely. You smile. Because somehow, that makes perfect sense. By the next morning, the palace is abuzz with whispers, and not just the fruit kind. Someone heard someone who swore they saw a streak of flour-dusted cloak vanish into the orchard. Someone else claimed the queen's favorite pear turned to mush mid-conversation. There's speculation. There's finger-pointing. There's even a brief petition to outlaw apricot juggling altogether. You, of course, say nothing. Because you have something better, a meeting with the pantry's internal council, formerly known as the Apron Codes. You're not quite sure what to expect. All you've been told is, dress discreetly, wear soft shoes, and avoid wearing anything that smells of nutmeg. Apparently, there was an incident. You arrive through a side entrance to the scullery, where a mirror tilts just slightly wrong and opens when tapped with the spine of a butter knife. Inside, a candlelit chamber strung with drying aprons, each one embroidered with a unique pattern. Some are dainty, others intimidating. One is covered entirely in cryptic gravy stains. The apron codes are already seated. 7 of them, each in a different style of apron. None speak. Until the tallest, whose apron appears to be woven from strands of licorice root, clears her throat. You've returned from the orchard intact, she says. You nod. Did they touch the white strawberries? No. She exhales. Then the treaty holds. For now. Another member, her apron shaped more like a battle flag, leans forward. What of the cheese drawer? Did you take the time? You nod again. And left a whisper note in exchange. They murmur approval. One of them claps softly, using the backs of her hands, which is apparently a coded gesture for well played, but don't get cocky. Then comes the matter of taxes. Yes, pantry taxes. You learn that in order to maintain balance, every successful secret transaction involving syrup, soft cheese, or spices ending in cardamom must be matched by a contribution to the pantry reserves. They call it the snack tax. You ask, innocently, what happens if someone doesn't pay the snack tax? The room darkens somehow, even though the candles haven't changed. Ask the eclair boy, someone whispers. You don't ask. Instead, you agree to contribute 2 jars of preserved plums, 1 recipe for rosemary buttercrumbs, and a polite poem about gooseberries. All payable within the week. The council rises as one, folding their aprons like monks after vespers. The meeting is over. Except one stops at the door and slips you a parcel. Inside, a napkin embroidered with the royal crest, and a crumb. You recognize it instantly. The Queen's personal shortbread. Which is odd, because the Queen hasn't had shortbread in years. Not since the almond incident, when a mislabeled cookie sparked an international misunderstanding involving Portugal and a goat. You take the clue to Henri. He listens, sniffs the crumb, raises a brow. This, he says, was baked yesterday. You both stare at the napkin. Then Henri mutters, impossible. Because if that shortbread is freshly baked, then someone has access to the royal kitchen. Which is locked. Always. Except on feast days and imperial toast rehearsals. And today is either. You follow him through the passage behind the servants' quarters, past the mural of dancing turnips, and down to the royal kitchen door. It's closed. It's always closed. But the smell wafting out? Buttery. Recent. Mischievous. Henri knocks once, twice, and then whistles a 3-note pastry code. No answer. So he tries again. This time, the door creaks open. Empty. Or so it seems. The hearth is warm. There are crumbs on the marble. A tray cooling. And on the tray? More shortbread. Fresh. Still soft at the center. Henri looks at you. They're mocking us. You look at the tray. They're inviting us. And that's when you find it. A small bowl tucked behind the mixing jars. Inside, gold flakes. Not decorative. Tax flakes. Rare ingredients issued only to bakers in the Queen's direct employ. You glance at Henri. He frowns. Only one person uses those. He doesn't say the name. But you both know it. Madame Finette. The Queen's personal pâtissière emerita. Retired. Allegedly. She disappeared 3 seasons ago after the infamous truffle custard scandal, retreating into silence and books and rosewater footbaths. But the shortbread? That's hers. Only hers. Which means she's either unretired, or someone has convinced her to bake again. And not for the palace. For them. You take the tray. Because, well, it would be rude not to. And because you suspect that somewhere in these shortbreads is the next message. You examine them carefully that evening. Each one has a different dusting pattern. Lattice. Spiral. A faint monogram. But the fourth? The fourth has dots. Tiny, deliberate dots, pressed into the sugar before baking. You squint. Hold it up to candlelight. It's a pattern. No, a map. You sketch it out, place the crumbs in a grid, compare it to the palace's lesser-known floor plans. It leads to the old linens vault, where no one has gone since the hot sheet rebellion of 1742. You gather your coat, your notebook, and a spoon for moral support. You slip out just before midnight, following the passage past the grand staircase, where a portrait of Louis XV appears to wink at you. And sure enough, in the narrow corridor behind the tapestries, a low door waits. Unmarked. Dusty. You use the spoon to lift the latch. Inside, sheets. So many sheets. Folded. Stacked. Whispering among themselves. And in the far corner, a lantern. Lit. Beside it, sitting cross-legged on a velvet comforter? Madame Finette. She's older, yes, but unmistakable. Her hands are flower-worn. Her apron bears the symbol of the very first pancake accord. And her expression? Mild amusement. You found me, she says without turning. I had help, you say. She nods. Of course you did. That's how it works. You sit. She offers you tea from a thermos. Cinnamon and cherry blossom. I've been watching, she says. You sip. Through the shortbread? And the cheese. And the lace. And once, through a mirror spoon I wasn't supposed to keep. You pause. Your pantry. She smiles faintly. I was pantry, she says. Now I'm something else. She stands, moves to a cupboard you hadn't noticed, and removes a small parcel. Inside, an eclair. Perfect. Balanced. Flavored with something like memory. She hands it to you. Deliver this, she says. And say nothing. Just leave it on the stool outside the map room. You nod. You don't ask what it's filled with. Because by now you understand. At Versailles, truth is rarely written. It is baked. The eclair is warm in your hand. Slightly glossy, with a gentle heft that suggests custard or perhaps something even more confidential. It smells faintly of lavender and a hint of citrus, subtle, deliberate, and definitely hiding something more than pastry cream. You don't dawdle. Because if Finette handed it to you personally and said say nothing, then saying anything would not just be impolite, it would be dangerous. You slip out of the linen's vault and into the hallway with the cracked mural of Neptune and his inexplicably shirtless dolphins. From there, it's a short climb to the map room, but you take the long way, through the gallery of forgotten crumbs, past the wall of ornamental napkin folds, and around the silent courtyard where rumor claims the first plum pit ever swallowed by royalty still echoes at night. The map room itself is locked. Always is. Not for security, but out of superstition. The palace cartographers of Louis XII's reign believed that the maps wandered if left unattended, occasionally redrawing doors and staircases to embarrass the nobility. It was either magic or just petty drafting. You don't try to go inside. You simply find the stool, plain, wooden, worn by centuries of indecision, and place the eclair on it. Neatly. With reverence. Then you step away. And wait. 2 minutes pass. The door creaks open. A hand, thin, gloved, precise, snatches the eclair, and the door closes again with the whisper of an exhaled promise. You exhale, too. Mission complete. Or, mostly. Because as you turn to leave, you spot something strange. A napkin. Folded. Lying just beside the stool. You pick it up. It's folded in a pattern you've never seen before, part swan, part pretzel, part coded message. You unfold it. Inside, a drawing. It's a triangle, inside a circle, with a spoon drawn vertically through the center. At the triangle's 3 points are 3 tiny shapes, a sugar cube, a sprig of mint, and a teacup. And beneath it, 5 handwritten words. Meet me by the eclairs. Which would be confusing, except, you just left one here. So clearly, the message was waiting for you. You turn around. No one. But the hallway light flickers, once, twice, like someone tapping on your shoulder with a breadstick. You follow the flicker. Down the servants' stair, past the custard storage vault, temporarily repurposed into a ballroom during the Great Lemon Shortage, and into the old pastry wing. It's unused now, abandoned after an ambitious attempt to reinvent jelly in 3 dimensions led to several minor duels and one very sticky chandelier. But someone's been here recently. There's flour on the floor. The kind that's freshly sifted and tracked lightly in spoon-shaped patterns. And there, near the massive marble slab once used for rolling out the Queen's millefeuille, stands a figure. Cloaked. Hooded. Still. You approach slowly. Did you leave the napkin? You ask. The figure nods. Then lowers the hood. It's Babette. She looks different here, less polished, more urgent. Her apron is gone. Her sleeves rolled. You saw the symbol? She asks. You nod. Triangle. Spoon. Mint. She pulls from her sleeve a parchment. Unfolds it. There it is again, same symbol, but older. Faded ink. The parchment is so brittle it crackles when she breathes. This is the crest of the original Guild of Folded Flavors, she says. Before the pantry. Before the unpantred. You blink. There was a guild. There still is. Barely. But they've been watching. And they've decided to intervene. You frown. Intervene? How? She hands you a scroll. Tied with string. Smells like cloves and high expectations. Inside, a menu. But not just any menu. A peace menu. 3 courses. 1 from the pantry. 1 from the unpantred. And 1, from the folded flavors. The old guild believes food unites, Babette says. They've proposed a summit. A single meal. All factions at the same table. You look at the menu. First course, butter whisper soup, by pantry tradition. Second course, radish jam tart, unpantred variant. Third course, trifold custard, identity unknown. You trace the last line. No recipe. No source. Just a name. And a date, tomorrow. They want you to make the third course, Babette says. You nearly drop the scroll. I've never made a trifold custard. No one has. Not since the Treaty of Pudding Rock. You sit on the edge of the old marble slab. Why me? Because, she says, you're the only one who's been in both kitchens. The only one who understands the difference between chaos and tradition, and why we need both. You glance down at your boots. They're covered in a light dusting of both powdered sugar and despair. I don't have the recipe, you murmur. Babette smiles. That, she says, is why we're going to the napkin archive. Of course there's a napkin archive. Hidden, naturally, beneath the disused napkin folding academy, which was shuttered years ago after an incident involving a swan fold that came disturbingly to life during a diplomatic brunch. It takes you 20 minutes to find the entrance, behind a fake bread rack and through a revolving shelf of royal menus. Inside, silence. Napkins. Thousands of them. Folded. Annotated. Stacked by technique and emotional resonance. You follow Babette down the aisle labeled herbal themes and into a side corridor marked desserts with political influence. At the very end, a drawer. Labeled only trifold. She pulls it out. Inside, one napkin. Cream-colored. Delicately embroidered. Folded into an impossible shape, 3 corners interlocked, with a center fold holding the balance. She doesn't open it. She hands it to you. You have until dusk, she says. No one can help. You take the napkin. It is warm, and smells faintly of nutmeg and revolution. Back in your room, you place it gently on your table. Unfold it slowly. Inside, not a recipe exactly. A poem. Written in rhyme, with clues buried in metaphor. You read the first line aloud. Whisk the wind but never churn. Let silence simmer while sauces burn. It's maddening. It's genius. You have no idea what it means. And yet, you also know exactly what to do. Because deep down, something in your custard soul recognizes this. This is baking as art. This is flavor as diplomacy. This is the future of Versailles, hidden in eggs and symbolism. You gather your tools. And you begin. You crack the first egg like it's a promise. The yolk slides into the bowl with a soft plop, golden and heavy with intent. The whites follow, more reluctant, clinging to their edges as if suspicious of what's to come. You hum the second line of the poem, trying to puzzle out its meaning. Temper thoughts with cinnamon breath. Or risk a custard's silent death. You add a pinch of cinnamon. Just a pinch. You've learned by now, in Versailles, cinnamon isn't a spice, it's a political statement. Your workspace is small but familiar. The borrowed kitchen behind the map room has just enough light and none of the surveillance. The copper pots hang like sentinels. The wooden spoons whisper encouragement. The smell of warming cream fills the air like a secret trying to stay hidden. The next lines guide your hand. Fold not once, but fold in 3, then hide the heart with sugared glee. You try. Fold the custard base with a spatula that once belonged to someone named Claude. You know because it's engraved, Claude's. Do not stir without asking. The folds are tricky. Custard doesn't want to be told what to do. It resists structure, rebels against rhythm. But you persist. Because this isn't just dessert. This is diplomacy. You reach the final lines of the napkin verse. Serve when stars begin to blink, and pair with thoughts you dare not think. You pause. That's not just metaphor. That's timing. They want this served exactly at twilight. When the first star appears, barely noticeable unless you're looking for it. A pastry aligned with the stars. Subtle. Symbolic. Treacherous. It's late afternoon now. You have only a few hours. You caramelize the top. Gently. No flame, just a hot spoon and a patient hand. The surface sets into a delicate crust, thin, whisper crisp, almost glass. You inhale. It smells of trust. Now comes the hardest part, keeping it safe. Because the peace dinner is tonight. And not everyone wants peace. The grand dining hall has been sealed off all afternoon. Guards with muffin-shaped badges stand watch. The table has been set with diplomatic silver, and every napkin has been folded into a piece of wearing a monocle, an attempt at whimsy, allegedly. You arrive with your custard under a cloche. Lisette meets you at the side entrance. She says nothing. Just nods once and leads you in. Inside, the scene is tense. On the pantry side, Babette, Henri, and 3 others wearing formal aprons with unnecessarily large embroidery. On the unpantred side, tall one, Radish, who is eating a raw carrot with defiance, don't tin, and someone new, masked, silent, holding a fork already. At the head of the table, Madame Finette. Neutral. Calm. Wearing an apron made of silk and old menus. She calls the room to order. The first course arrives, butter whisper soup. Clear, golden, elegant. A spoonful delivers a memory of lullabies and lemon zest. The pantry representatives nod in approval. The second course, radish jam tart, is loud, messy, and slightly offensive. But undeniably good. It has the audacity of truth, served with a garnish of parsley and reckless hope. Then it's your turn. You place the trifold custard at the center of the table. No one speaks. The cloche comes off. Steam rises. The scent wraps around the room. Nutmeg, star anise, memory, caution. You serve 7 portions. Evenly. Modestly. The first star appears outside the tall window. The room holds its breath. They eat. First a bite. Then another. No one speaks. Then Babette exhales and says, I taste rosemary. Don't tin mutters, and guilt. Tall one blinks. And almond. But not almond. Memory of almond. Madame Finette smiles faintly. The trifold has spoken, she says. Someone at the far end wipes a tear. And then, quite naturally, the tension breaks. A laugh. A raised glass. A second helping. No treaties are signed. No dramatic declarations made. But something shifts. A bite of custard can't fix everything. But it can start something. And sometimes, in Versailles, that's enough. Later that night, back in your room, you find a package. Unmarked. Wrapped in linen. Heavy. You open it. Inside, the real spoon. The first spoon. Returned. Quietly. Without fanfare. Just a folded note inside. Custard is safer in your hands. Don't lose it. Or stir too vigorously. DT. You smile. Because of course Don't Tin would return it like this. You lift the spoon. It hums. Not with noise, but with calm. Like it's pleased to be back. Like it remembers everything and forgives most of it. You set it on your table. Next to the napkin poem. Next to your own scribbled recipe for what just became the most important dessert in Versailles. A knock at your door. You open it. Lisette again. She's holding a teacup. You forgot this, she says. She hands it over. It's full of spiced milk. And floating in it? A sugar cube carved into the shape of a spoon. You both smile. Tomorrow, she says, there's a picnic. You raise an eyebrow. A diplomatic picnic. You sigh, mock dramatic. Will there be crust? Only the finest. She walks away. You sip the milk. Warm. Sweet. Full of promises you haven't made yet. The spoon glows faintly in the candlelight. Outside, the second star appears. Inside, you feel full. And for once, entirely at peace. Morning arrives at Versailles like a very fancy rooster. Late, overdressed, and in no particular hurry to be helpful. The sun slinks across the silk curtains of your chamber. casting delicate shadows shaped suspiciously like teacups on the wall. Somewhere down the corridor, someone is practicing courtly laughter. You hear a flute. Or a pigeon. Honestly, at this hour, it could be either. Today is picnic day. A diplomatic one, no less. The kind of picnic where alliances are formed over tartlets, and trust is tested with jam pairings. Where the wrong pastry can start a misunderstanding, and a too soggy tart crust might end in exile, or worse, a very stern poem. You rise. Dress simply. Apron optional but encouraged. And you bring the spoon. Not to flaunt it, but, well, yes. To flaunt it. Respectfully. The picnic is being held at the East Wing lawn, just beside the reflecting pool that famously does not reflect anything anymore due to a mild curse and a duck incident. Long tables have been arranged under pale awnings. Lace-trimmed cloths. Crystal pitchers. Baskets of breads labeled in 4 languages. It's less a picnic and more a well-behaved food opera. Babette waves you over to the pantry's side, where the color scheme today is neutral intimidation, soft whites, precise tans, and one rogue napkin embroidered with a passive-aggressive croissant. Where's the spoon? She whispers. You tap your satchel. Good, she says, visibly relaxing. It's mostly for show today. Like a ceremonial ladle. Or a scepter. But tastier. You nod and scan the tables. The unpantred have also arrived. They're dressed oddly. Radish is wearing a velvet jacket with buttons shaped like sardines. Doormen has constructed a hat out of pastry boxes. And Tall One? Tall One is in robes made entirely of dried thyme sprigs. It's aromatic. There is, however, one new face among them, a young woman with flour-dusted gloves and a serious expression. She's staring directly at the bread basket like it insulted her ancestors. Babette notices. That's Fennel. New recruit. Fermentation specialist. Very talented. Very dramatic. Of course she is. A bell rings, not for food, but for diplomacy. Madame Finette appears, carried by what may or may not be a throne on wheels disguised as a dessert cart. She disembarks gracefully, adjusts her lemon-colored shawl, and takes her place at the center table. Friends, she begins, and culinary adversaries who are still technically on probation. There's polite laughter. We gather today in the spirit of delicate compromise, gentle flavors, and very firm shortbread. Let us eat first. And talk later. This is the wisest thing anyone has said in Versailles in months. You sit. Plates arrive. The menu is collaborative. A scone dreamed up by both factions, flaky, peppered, lightly regrettable in a charming way. A fruit salad that contains more symbolism than nutrients. And the star of the meal, lemon biscuits dusted with powdered peas. They're lovely. But there's tension. Small. Subtle. Like an overproof dough, looks smooth, but you know it's about to crack. The biscuits, you realize, are the problem. They're too perfect. Uniform. Symmetrical. No soul. Henri leans over to you. These are ministry issued, he mutters. You blink. The flavor ministry? He nods. You know they've been trying to regulate citrus. You glance down at your biscuit. Indeed, it tastes like something that had to pass 7 committees. And that's when it happens. A fork clinks too loudly. Someone sniffs. And Fennel stands. Permission to flavor independently, she says loudly. Finette raises an eyebrow. Fennel, we agreed. I respectfully decline the committee's biscuit, Fennel says, reaching into her pocket. Out comes a jar. Unlabeled. Cloudy. Possibly alive. She unscrews the lid. A smell escapes. Bold. Curious. Slightly oaky. Like fermented lemon and rebellion. She takes one of the uniform biscuits, breaks it in half, and dips it into her jar. Then eats. The room freezes. And then... Babette stands. She also breaks a biscuit. Also dips. Also eats. Radish gasps audibly. Now it's a movement. Within minutes, the ministry biscuits are abandoned. The table erupts into improvised jam combinations, whispered flavor confessions, and quiet debates about whether nutmeg counts as a neutral spice. And through it all, you hold the spoon. Just once, you raise it above your head, casually, like someone stretching after a good nap. The sunlight catches on it. Everyone sees. The message is clear, the relic's back. And it approves. A new accord begins, less formal than last night's dinner, more buttery. It's not a treaty. It's a tart understanding. That flavor cannot be standardized. That piece is messy, and often involves unexpected zest. Later, as the sun dips low and the reflecting pool finally reflects something, a goose, inexplicably, you find yourself lying on the grass beside Doormen and Fennel. You're all eating the same pear, passed politely. Doormen offers you a pickle. You accept. Fennel says nothing. But she hands you a jar of that mystery lemon jam. You'll need this, she says. For what? For what comes next. You raise an eyebrow. Which is? She just shrugs. But you notice she's carved something into the lid of the jar. A single symbol. A spoon. Inside a spiral. It's not from any pantry you know. Which means new flavors are coming. New recipes. New rules. And as you close your eyes, the spoon resting gently beside you, you hear the orchard trees sigh in relief. Or maybe laughter. Hard to say. In Versailles, even the wind plays favorites. You're back in the whispering pantry. It's after midnight, and technically you're only here to return a jar of preserved gooseberries someone borrowed without documentation. But honestly, you're staying because the cheese drawer has been humming again. It's not an urgent hum. More of a gentle purr. Like the brie inside is trying to tell you about a dream it once had. You slide open the drawer, careful not to disturb the time bundle still drying beside it. Inside, no cheese. Just a folded note, smelling faintly of sugar and faintly more of mischief. You unfold it. Sweet nothings await in the boudoir. Knock 3 times on the Queen's fainting couch. Bring syrup. Not honey. That was last season. There's no signature, of course. Just a pressed violet sealed in sugar at the bottom. You fold the note and tuck it in your sleeve. Syrup. That's easy. Henry's been aging a small flask of plum syrup behind the spice cabinet, claiming it's for personal use only, which in pantry terms is basically an open invitation. You retrieve the flask, avoid eye contact with the cinnamon sticks, they know, and make your way toward the Queen's boudoir. Well, one of them. There were 7, technically. This one, known internally as Silk Chamber C, was her preferred room for fainting, powdering, and occasionally throwing feather fans at ambassadors who overstayed their welcome. It's abandoned now. Officially sealed. Unofficially full of ghosts who smell like rosewater and maybe light disappointment. You knock 3 times on the fainting couch, syrup flask in hand. Nothing happens. Then the couch sighs. Not a creak. Not a squeak. A literal sigh. And the wall behind it slides open. You're through it before you have time to second-guess your life choices. Behind the wall, velvet stairs, curving downward. Syrup lanterns flicker to life as you descend. You count 27 steps before the air shifts. It smells like powdered sugar, warm ink, and secrets. You reach the bottom. And find yourself in the boudoir of sweet nothings. You didn't think it was real. Babette once called it that syrup-soaked fantasy of a room, whispered about only in the oldest pantry tales. But here it is. A room bathed in candlelight. Walls lined with velvet-draped shelves holding jars, hundreds of them. All different sizes. All labeled with names. Not ingredients. Names. You step closer. One jar reads, Delphine's Laugh, 1762. Another, Marcel's Apology, Unspoken, 1749. And a third, Odette's Third Wink, 1718. Their memories. Preserved. In syrup. You unscrew the lid of Delphine's Laugh. A soft giggle escapes. High, delighted, echoing faintly before fading into the velvet hush. You screw it shut quickly. The label glows faintly, approved. Then you hear a voice. Soft. Floating. Familiar. You're earlier than expected. You turn. It's Finette. Wearing an apron embroidered with lace and time. She sits in a high-backed chair made of spun sugar and possibly diplomacy. This, she says, gesturing around, is the archive of sweetness. Every moment too fleeting to keep, too delicate to survive in memory alone. We preserve them here. For balance. You stare at the jars. Why? Because sweetness is a resource, she says. Like flour or trust. She rises, moves to a small cabinet, unlocks it with a spoon-shaped key. Inside, a new jar. Unlabeled. She hands it to you. You're going to need this. You peer at it. The syrup inside glows slightly. You open it. No scent. No sound. Just a feeling. Comfort. Warmth. Familiarity, like remembering a bedtime story you forgot you knew. What is it? You ask. She smiles. It's your first secret. You blink. But I haven't preserved one yet. You have, she says. You just don't know which one. She places a second jar beside it. This one labeled L, and the broken biscuit, recovered. Lisette? You ask. Finette nods. She preserved a moment for you, she says. And in return you owe her one. You exhale. Because this is how it works. Pastry diplomacy. Jarred memory. Sweet nothings that hold entire truths. You follow Finette as she leads you to a long velvet ledger. Inside are names, moments, exchanges. It's a recipe of human emotion written out in syrup and time. She points to a name near the bottom. Fennel, you read aloud. Next to it, a line scratched through. Then, below it, pending preservation. She's holding something back, Finette says. Something that could change everything. What happens if she doesn't preserve it? You ask. She ferments, Finette says simply. And sometimes that's explosive. You nod. What do you need me to do? Finette hands you a napkin. Folded 3 times. Not the usual 2. Not the rare 4. 3. That's a message. You take it. Tuck it into your sleeve. She smiles. You'll know when to open it. As you leave the boudoir, you feel the jar in your pocket warming gently. Sweetness, waiting to be remembered. The walls close behind you with a sigh. The couch accepts you back with no judgment. Back in your room, you examine the jar again. Still no label. Still no scent. But now you hear something faint. Not a word. Not a laugh. Just the soft sound of syrup settling around a secret. You set it on the shelf beside your ledger. And wait. Because somewhere out there, Fennel is holding a recipe inside her chest that she doesn't want anyone to taste. And someone is going to have to coax it out with kindness, flavor, and perhaps, just perhaps, an illicit biscotti. The ghost appears, as these things tend to, somewhere between the second napkin fold and the first sip of post-midnight cinnamon milk. It doesn't announce itself. It just exists. You're in the pantry again, this time doing inventory, because someone misfiled the preserved pomegranate tears under savory regrets, and now everything smells vaguely of emotional chutney. You reach for a jar, pause, and suddenly realize the air is colder. The candles flicker. And the brie drawer, yes, that one, is open by exactly 1 inch. Inside, not cheese. Not thyme. But a feather. Black. With sugar crystals on the edge. You don't touch it. Instead, you glance up, and there it is. In the corner. Hovering just above the liqueur shelf. Not menacing. Just there. A figure draped in what appears to be old tablecloths, faintly glowing, and holding, of all things, a charcuterie board. You blink. The ghost blinks back. Then, slowly, silently, floats down. Sets the board on the prep table. And points. You approach carefully, heart thudding in that specific rhythm reserved for possibly haunted but definitely delicious moments. The board is exquisite. Cheeses you've never seen. A salami shaped like a musical note. Walnuts carved into roses. and in the center, a folded napkin. Of course. You unfold it. Inside, written in an elaborate hand, is a message. Return what you borrowed, or I'll start seasoning the mirrors again. You pause. Seasoning the mirrors? Henri once told you a story about a ghost cook who, frustrated by being ignored, dusted every reflective surface in the east wing with powdered mustard. For weeks, guests thought they had rashes. Or worse, opinions. You look back at the ghost. It tilts its head. Then, suddenly, gestures wildly toward the cupboard near the preserves. You walk over. It points again. You open it. Inside, a spoon. Not the spoon, but a spoon. Carved. Ornate. With initials. M.G. Marcel Gâteau. You've heard the name. A butler pâtissier from the late 1600s. Rumored to have invented the concept of crisis canapés, tiny, panic-soothing snacks delivered to courtiers mid-duel or post-scandal. He vanished under mysterious circumstances after an incident involving a mis-flavored pear and a jealous marmalade dealer. This must be him. Is this yours? You ask. The ghost nods. Twice. Then holds up a second note. Left it behind. Pantry kept it. Wanted it back. But they forgot me. You exhale. The jar. The syrup jar Finette gave you, the one with no label. You rush to retrieve it. Hold it up. The ghost leans in. Its faint glow brightens. Then, without a sound, it presses a transparent hand to the glass. The syrup swirls. Forms letters. Marcel's final flavor. You unscrew the lid. A smell rises. Faint, nostalgic, absurdly buttery. The ghost sighs. Then fades. Not with drama. With relief. The pantry warms. The candles still. And on the board, where the ghost once hovered, is a tiny card. A recipe. Written in cursive so flowery it almost sneezes off the page. Gâteau's melancholy bites. You scan the ingredients. Apricot paste. Candy thyme. A drop of sorrow steeped in honey. This is not a normal snack. But you understand the purpose. Some flavors aren't made to delight. They're made to remember. To acknowledge. To say, yes, we forgot you. But not forever. You fold the recipe. Place it in your ledger. Henri will want to try it. Babette too. And Finette? She'll just nod knowingly. You return the spoon to its proper shelf. Label it. M.G. Ghost approved. And for good measure, you leave a few candied rose petals in the brie drawer. A peace offering. As you're cleaning up, you spot one final thing. A mirror. Untouched. But on its surface, faint dust. Not powdered mustard, but sugar. Drawn in the shape of a spoon, crossed by a feather. You laugh. Because apparently even ghosts have a flair for branding. Later, back in your room, you open the syrup jar again. Inside, a second swirl appears. A name. Don't tin. You frown. But the name fades before you can ask questions. The jar is just a jar again. Almost. You set it down beside the Marcel spoon. Whisper thank you, not to anyone in particular. And for a moment, you swear the air responds. With warmth. And a faint smell of cured ham. Because this is Versailles. And even the spirits snack politely. It begins, as most betrayals do at Versailles, with a perfectly innocent tart. You find it in your quarters, on your writing desk, precisely centered, atop a folded napkin embroidered with the tiny symbol of the Trianon Teacup Society, defunct, due to infighting over mint placement. The tart is lemon. Bright. Golden. Balanced with a glaze that smells like someone whispered the idea of honey into a dream. You do not trust it. Which is unfortunate, because you eat half before you remember not to. Still, there's no bitterness. No foul play. Just intention. And hidden beneath the tart? A note. The tart tunnels are compromised. Clean your ledger. Trust no one. Except maybe the guy who smells like nutmeg. R. You don't know who R is. But the mention of the tart tunnels, that covert system of secret pastry routes used by generations of snack smugglers, sends your stomach into a cautious backflip. You'd heard rumors of collapse, of sabotage, of someone trying to flood the puff pastry vault. You thought it was kitchen gossip. Apparently not. You pocket the note and begin the process known, semi-officially, as crumb protocol. Step 1. Clean your ledger. You remove your recipe log from beneath the false bottom of your sugar bin, then carefully steam away the jam stamps on any sensitive entries. You erase references to fermented tea cake diplomacy and the egg custard incident, which, in retrospect, involved too many metaphors. Step 2. Inventory your allies. You trust Babette, mostly. You trust Henri, but only if he's recently eaten. Lisette? Yes. The cheese knows her name. That's enough. Fennel? Complicated. Dontin? Increasingly mysterious. Finette? She's 3 steps ahead at all times, which is either comforting or deeply unsettling. Step 3. Check the tunnels. You leave your chamber quietly, taking the syrup lantern from behind your shelf. It glows a gentle pink when shaken. Good syrup means a clear path. At least in theory. You duck into the baseboard passage behind the hallway mirror, the one hidden behind a shelf of decorative eclairs. The tunnel beyond is damp and slightly flour-dusted. It smells faintly of mold and very strongly of basil scones. Halfway in, the syrup light dims. A warning. You kneel. Press your ear to the wall. A sound. Scratching. Then whispering. Then giggling? You creep forward. There, at the first turn, is a sight no snack smuggler wants to see. Crumbs. Unattended. Crumbs that clearly once belonged to a pastry of strategic importance. Possibly almond-based. Possibly filled with state secrets. Beside them, in melted sugar, a symbol. A spiral. Drawn backward. That's the mark of the crumb turncoats. An underground faction that broke away from the pantry long ago, claiming snack neutrality and swearing off all warm desserts. It was mostly about pie crust grievances. Still, they're dangerous. You rush back to your chamber and find Lisette waiting. She holds up her hand before you speak. You're being watched, she says. How many? You ask. At least 3. Pantry? One's wearing a radish pin. Could be unpantred. You sigh. Lisette hands you a scroll. Unmarked. Sealed with what appears to be a raisin. You break it open. Inside, a map of the tart tunnels. Updated. Modified. And most importantly, sabotaged. Routes crossed out. New forks added. One tunnel, the apricot corridor, labeled compromised. Avoid. Smells like betrayal. At the very bottom, a name. Roulade. You blink. That's impossible. Roulade disappeared years ago after the Great Puff Pastry trial. He was accused of layering deceit into his millefeuille, literally, and fled with the pantry's golden egg whisk. If he's back. Lisette taps the map. There's one safe route, she says. But it leads through the jam archive. You shudder. The jam archive is haunted. Not in the ghostly sense. In the way of stickiness, forgotten debts, and the faint echo of preserved arguments. Still, if it's the only way. You prep for the descent. Apron reinforced. Shoes, honey-resistant. Satchel, loaded with spoon, syrup jar, 3 plausible excuses. You and Lisette sneak out under cover of ambient lute music, slipping past the West Hall sconces and down through the Whisper Vault staircase. The air thickens. Not unpleasantly, just with the vague guilt of fruit left too long on the vine. You reach the archive door. It swings open at your touch. Inside, jars. Rows and rows of preserved statements, sealed in sugar and shame. There's tension here. Jars that rattle. Jars that whisper. Jars labeled things like I meant to invite you, Cherry, 1726, and your soufflé was fine, actually, Quince, 1731. You move quickly. Find the hidden latch behind the peach confessional and pull. A new tunnel opens. Narrow. Lit by flickering fondant lamps. The way smells faintly of lavender and espionage. You follow it down, and just when you think it's a dead end, you hear something. Spoons clinking. Two voices. One is unmistakably Doormen. The other is Fennel. You press your ear to the wall. Fennel, we can't keep the pastry lines open if Roulade keeps diverting the ingredients. Doormen, I know. But he's charming. And he has figs. Fennel, he's playing both sides. Even the ghosts are confused. Doormen, they always are. You tap 3 times, a cautious knock. The wall slides open. They both look up. You raise your hands. I come bearing syrup and questions. Doormen sighs. Fennel scowls. You step inside. The room is small. Circular. Lit by molten sugar tubes along the ceiling. A makeshift map lies on the table. At the center, Roulade's name. Circled. What's his game? You ask. Fennel shrugs. He wants to control the tart tunnels, control the snacks. Control the pantry piece. Doormen nods. He's gathering old recipes. Some of them were sealed for a reason. You pull out the note from your pocket. The one from R. Fennel reads it. That's not him, she says. That's Radish. You blink. Radish? She's involved? Doormen passes you a card. On it, a crude sketch of a tart. And under it in block letters. One last bake. Midnight. Outer court. You nod. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. But you're going anyway. Because this is what diplomacy looks like in Versailles. Crumbling crusts, stolen recipes, half-truths, and the knowledge that sometimes the only way to protect what's sweet is to bake louder than the lies. The outer court is not where snacks go to be enjoyed. It's where they go to be tested. Where even the brave hesitate, and even the crustiest pies sweat a little under the moonlight. It was once used for pastry banishment, an experimental oven zone known unofficially as the flake yard. Not because of its crusts, but because anyone working there had a habit of mysteriously flaking out, disappearing, or joining a rogue vinaigrette cult. Tonight the court is quiet. Moonlight slicks across the polished stones. At the far end, beneath an archway draped in faded vanilla banners, sits a table. Long empty. Except for one tart. You approach. Each footstep echoes with absurd tension, like a spatula about to be used as a weapon in a diplomatic duel. Radish is already there, seated cross-legged on a bench, humming to herself and slicing apples with a knife shaped like betrayal. You sit across from her. Say nothing. Wait. She looks up. You brought the spoon? She asks. You nod. Pull it from your satchel and set it on the table, its surface gleaming in the low light. Radish sighs. I didn't want this, she says, almost too softly. I just wanted balance. The pantry always hoards the good ingredients. You shrug. That's fair. But smuggling doesn't fix it. She tilts her head. Neither does ignoring it. She points to the tart between you. This is the last bake, she says. The one that decides it. You raise an eyebrow. Decides what, exactly? She grins, all teeth and fennel-scented defiance. Who gets to rewrite the pantry codes? Ah. So that's what this is. A recipe duel. No spoons at dawn. No flour-thrown fisticuffs. Just 2 minds, 1 tart, and the strange truth that in Versailles, flavor often decides policy. You inspect the tart. Crust braided. Showy. Impressive. Filling, fig, lavender, sharp citrus rind, bold, almost aggressive. You taste a sliver. It's good. Too good. Weaponized good. If she's trying to start a movement with it, she might succeed. You set the fork down. Well? Radish leans in. Your turn. Of course. You open your satchel. Remove your backup pouch of emergency tartlets. Don't ask, and select a shell. A plain one. Unbaked. Empty. You raise your eyes to hers. Watch. You open the jar. The syrup jar. The one without a label. The one with the whispers. It glows faintly. You pour just a teaspoon into the crust. Then, a spoonful of your secret ricotta blend, infused with thyme, sorrow, and a splash of apology cordial. On top of that, thin sliced candied pear, arranged not as a design, but as a memory. You finish with a single mint leaf. Wilted. On purpose. Radish watches in silence. This is your rebellion? She says. No, you say calmly. This is an offering. You push the tart across the table. She eats. Chews slowly. Frowns. Then. Tears up. Just a little. Why does this taste like my cousin's wedding? She asks, wiping her eyes. The one with the melted gazebo and the crying goat. You nod. Because that's what it's made of. She sniffs. Is this emotional manipulation? Yes, you reply. But with butter. She stares at you. Then reaches under the table. Pulls out a scroll. Tosses it onto the tablecloth with a dramatic clatter only slightly ruined by a sticky raisin stuck to the seal. You open it. It's a draft. A proposed rewrite of the pantry codes. Co-authored. Pantry. Unpantred. Folded flavors. Even a scribbled suggestion from Don't Tin about soup categories. Should gazpacho be illegal in winter? You glance up at Radish. You were never really sabotaging, you say. She shrugs. Sabotage gets attention. But what I really wanted was an edit. You nod. Because you understand. Sometimes you need to burn a tart to get someone to taste the crust. She slides the scroll closer. The others will meet us tomorrow, she says. But tonight, we sleep. You collect your things. Slip the scroll into your satchel, next to the spoon, the jar, and your fading skepticism. As you walk away from the outer court, the moon shifts just enough to illuminate something at your feet. Another tart. Abandoned. Half-eaten. On a plate made of pressed pastry notes. You pick it up. Underneath, a folded napkin. Embossed with a spiral. And a sentence. Some crumbs are planted. Not spilled. It's not Radish's handwriting. It's Roulad's. He's still out there. And he's watching. You pocket the napkin. Step carefully. And realize, the tart tunnels may be compromised. But the recipe's still yours. And tomorrow, Versailles will taste something new. The morning smells like compromise. Not in a bad way. It's more cinnamon forward than you expected. Maybe even a little buttery around the edges, with a lingering trace of something politely fermented. Today is not about drama. Today is the bake. The official, sanctioned, very much scrutinized grand unifying tart bake, held in the dome of deliberate desserts, a space so rarely used that the key had to be retrieved from the pocket of a statue who refused to give it up without being offered a scone. You arrive early. So does Radish. She's wearing a robe made entirely of puff pastry layers. Somehow, it doesn't crumble. You nod to each other. Mutual respect. A faint smell of strawberry anxiety. By the time the others arrive, the ovens are already warm. Babette. Henri. Lizette. Don't Tin. Fennel. Even Tall One, who hasn't spoken since the custard incident but communicates today by blinking twice for yes and very slowly eating a crouton for no. Finette appears last. Wearing a cloak made of oven mitts and mood. She approaches the ceremonial prep station, a circular slab of marble etched with ancient flower splotches and rumors, and places a single item at the center. A golden tart pan. No one speaks. Not until she clears her throat and says, "We are here to bake not for conquest. Not for correction. But for coherence." She raises a spoon. Not the spoon. A neutral one. A tasting spoon, passed down by pastry judges so impartial they once ruled against themselves to preserve the balance of sweetness. The moment it touches the pan, the bake begins. Everyone contributes. Henri whisks, rhythmically, with purpose. Babette blends. Her custard base sings slightly, which is normal, she assures you. Don't tin handles crust. Fennel ferments a surprise. You handle flavor harmonics, the ratios, the rhythm, the undercurrents of nostalgic acidity. And radish? She does the fruit. She slices with reverence. Arranges them not by color, but by meaning. Pears for stubborn truths. Figs for old loyalties. Strawberries for secrets admitted too late. By mid-morning, the tart is ready. Unbaked but whole. Finette nods. You have 1 hour, she says. Bake wisely. The oven opens. The tart slides in. Everyone holds their breath. Well, almost everyone. Tin sneezes once, but very quietly. And then, waiting. Some pass the time re-embroidering aprons. Others hum ancient pantry hymns. You sit beside Radish. She leans over and whispers, I dreamed of the spoon last night. You raise an eyebrow. It told me, she continues, to trust the crust. You nod solemnly. It often does. She laughs. And then, ding! The tart is done. You remove it together, gloved hands lifting carefully. It's beautiful. Simple. No frills. No ambitious height. Just flavor folded into truth. Finette steps forward. Holds up the spoon. First taste, she says. Slices one piece. A single bite. Chews. Pauses. And smiles. Not a large smile, but enough to unwrinkle one corner of her robe. She nods. Then gestures for the others. Each person tastes. No comments. Just nods. Even Fennel. Even Tall One, who nods twice. When it's your turn, you take a bite. It tastes like every pastry you've ever wanted to share. Balanced. A little tangy. Very honest. At the bottom of the slice, nestled beneath the fig layer, you find a folded note. No one else seems surprised. You unfold it. You did not lose the spoon. You carried it well. But know this. Roulade has begun baking in the West Pantry shadows. And he has recipes we burn for a reason. It's unsigned. But there's a trace of powdered mint on the paper. You show it to Finette. She sighs. Roulade never could leave well enough unsifted. Radish leans in. What do we do? Finette places the note in her sleeve. Nothing, she says. Not today. She lifts her teacup. To the bake accord. Everyone raises theirs. To the spoon. To sweet diplomacy. To tart truce. To not getting jam on our sleeves. You clink cups. And just like that, the tart becomes legend. Not because it was perfect, but because it was shared. That evening you sit in your chamber. Ledger open. Spoon resting beside your latest entry. Syrup jar glowing faintly. The kitchen air is still. Outside somewhere, Roulade plots. But inside? Inside you are full. Not with pride. Not with sugar. But with the quiet certainty that you helped bake something worth remembering. A flavor shared. A crust trusted. A spoon passed. And as the moonlight catches on the spoon's edge, you close the ledger. Pull up the quilt made of stitched napkins and half-forgotten recipes. Close your eyes. And exhale. Because in Versailles, the war may never be over. But the tart? The tart was peace. And now, dear listener, it's time to let the oven cool, the spoons rest, and your thoughts float gently like flour on a breeze. You're no longer in the pantry, not really. The syrup has settled. The tart has been shared. The ledger is closed, its pages sticky with history and sugar alike. Somewhere in a quiet corridor of Versailles, a whisper drifts through the air, maybe from a jar, maybe from a forgotten recipe, and it says, well done. Not perfect. But enough. And sometimes, in a world of crust politics and jam allegiances, enough is the sweetest thing of all. Your feet feel warm, wrapped in the soft glow of candlelight. The air hums with lavender. And in the distance, beyond the echoes of the tart bake and the murmurs of long-past pastry ghosts, You hear only the gentle scrape of a spoon against an empty bowl. Satisfied. Silent. Still. Let your breath slow. Let the corners of your thoughts unfurl, like parchment left too long in a sunny windowsill. The spoon rests now. And so can you. Good night, my fellow baker of balance, wielder of flavor, smuggler of small sweetnesses. May your dreams be layered like pastry. Delicate. Flaky. Safe.